Hey guys, tonight we're doing something cold, miserable, and almost certainly fatal. You're about to follow in the boot-sucked footsteps of thousands of desperate gold hunters on the most dangerous trail in North American history, the Chilkoot Trail. This isn't just a fun hike with some historical flair. No, this is the brutal, body-breaking, blizzard-blasted path into the Klondike goldfields. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments what city you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. I'm curious who else is winding down their night with this particular brand of historical masochism. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's 1897. The gold strike in the Klondike has just hit the papers in Seattle and San Francisco, and the fever spreads like wildfire. Everyone with a pickaxe and a pulse is suddenly possessed with the idea that they'll strike it rich. You, unfortunately, are one of them. You sell your possessions, maybe a horse, maybe your dignity, and catch the first steamship heading north. You're packed onto a creaking, crowded boat like a sardine in thermal underwear, and the moment you see the jagged coastline of Alaska, it hits you. This might be the dumbest thing you've ever done. The boat docks in a soggy frontier town. Let's call it Dyer, although spelling it doesn't matter. It's already ankle-deep in mud and broken dreams. You step off the ship and into a mess of tents, shouting men, makeshift trading posts, and the thick smell of unwashed ambition. There's no welcome sign. Just some guy screaming about bacon prices and another trying to sell you a miracle tonic that smells suspiciously like rum and regret. Someone mentions the Chilkoot Trail like it's a rite of passage. You hear things like doable if you're tough, only 33 miles, and bring snowshoes. What they don't mention is that it's uphill, icy, avalanche-prone, and haunted by the ghosts of people who thought they were tougher than the trail. But you're in too deep to back out now. You've already spent your life savings on a pickaxe, a gold pan, and 900 pounds of beans. Now here's the twist. The Canadian Mounties at the top of the trail won't let anyone into the Yukon unless they're carrying at least 1 ton of supplies. Literally, 1 ton. That's 2,000 pounds. That means you'll be carrying your gear piece by piece over the pass. Not once, not twice, but probably 30 or 40 times. You're going to walk the same miserable stretch so often you could do it blindfolded. Some people did, by accident. They didn't make it. Your first morning on the trail begins before the sun even tries to rise. The air has teeth and your breath fogs out like you're smoking a pipe made of ice. Your backpack digs into your shoulders like it's trying to become part of your skeleton. The trail starts gently enough, winding through damp forest and mossy rock. But soon the trees thin, the air gets colder, and the mud turns to snow, and then to ice. You pass people who look like they've been out here since the dawn of time, bearded men with cracked hands and 10-yard stares, women in skirts hauling sleds, a guy carrying a full cast-iron stove. That's not an exaggeration. People really brought stoves. One man even tried dragging a bathtub. He abandoned it 5 miles in. It's probably still out there, waiting for some confused bear to stumble upon it. Then, the weather turns on a dime. It always does. Sunny mornings become blizzards by lunchtime. The wind screams down from the mountains like it's mad at you personally. Visibility drops to nothing, and suddenly you're not sure where the trail is. You trudge forward, praying you're still on the path and not just wandering into oblivion. By nightfall, you're soaked, frozen, and emotionally hollow. You pitch your tent between 2 boulders, heat a tin of beans over a flickering flame, and try not to cry when your only dry pair of socks turns out to be slightly mouldy. Welcome to the Chilkoot Trail. There are no refunds. Somewhere nearby, a prospector tells you the story of a man who tried to sneak through with half a load of supplies. The Mounties turned him back. He tried again, this time with forged papers. They caught him, beat him, and sent him walking home in his long johns. The trail does not reward cleverness. It rewards stubbornness, and occasionally insanity. At one point during the night you hear something that could be wolves, or other prospectors. It's hard to tell which would be worse. You pull your blankets tighter, stare up at the canvas of your tent, and wonder what exactly it is you've done. Tomorrow you'll carry another 100-pound load up the icy slope, and the day after that, and the day after that. You start hearing the phrase, "the trail claims everyone in the end." It's a mix of superstition and cruel practicality. Some people freeze to death, others fall off cliffs, a few just give up. Their gear sits abandoned on the trail, half buried in snow like weird modern art sculptures of regret. You'll see a piano one day, a rocking chair the next. There's even a brass bed frame out here, stranded on a ridge, slowly rusting under 40 feet of snow. Who thought that was a good idea? But the real kicker? Some people never even make it out of Dyer. They take one look at the mountains and turn back, muttering something about bad timing or urgent dental issues. You think they're cowards, until your third day on the trail, when your boots freeze solid overnight and you're forced to warm them over a fire just to slide them back on. Suddenly, urgent dental issues sounds like a valid excuse, and yet you keep going, one boot in front of the other, because at this point it's not about gold anymore, it's about surviving, about proving you can beat the trail before it beats you, and so you hike on, into the cold and the dark, chasing a dream that's already crushed better people than you. You wake up stiff, sore, and coated in a fine dusting of snow inside your tent. At first, you think it's a nightmare. Then the smell of your boots reminds you that, no, this is real. You're still on the trail, still in Alaska, still voluntarily dragging your worldly possessions over a mountain for a shot at gold that may already be gone. You're not alone, of course. You've fallen in with a group of other dreamers, which makes the trail slightly less awful. There's Thomas, a Chicago barber who's never camped a day in his life. Maggie, who talks tough, chews tobacco, and carries a rifle like she was born with it strapped to her back. And Levi, who has the 1,000-yard stare of a man already planning his obituary. You're a mismatched team of fools, all equally obsessed with making it to Dawson City. The rhythm of the trail is brutal. Wake up freezing, cook something barely edible, shoulder your load, hike uphill through snow and mud for several hours, dump your load at a cache point, hike back down, and repeat. On average, it takes 30 to 40 round trips to haul 1 ton of gear over the Chilkoot Pass. Do the math. If it's a 5-mile climb to the summit, that's 10 miles round trip. Multiply that by 30, and you're looking at nearly 300 miles, just to move your stuff once. That's longer than the entire state of Ohio, and you're doing it with 100 pounds on your back while your sweat freezes in your beard. And remember, everyone has to bring a ton of supplies. That's not a poetic exaggeration, it's law. The Canadian government decided that anyone heading into the Yukon needed enough gear to survive for a year, and honestly, that was one of the smarter decisions in this whole gold rush madness. Because once you get out there, it's not like you can pop over to the store for a sack of flour. No one's restocking, no one's delivering. If you forgot it, you're dead. So what's in this magical ton of survival gear? Oh, just the basics. 200 pounds of flour, 50 pounds of bacon, 40 pounds of beans, salt, sugar, tea, dried fruit, soap, matches, rope, nails, blankets, clothing, tools, stoves, cooking pots, tents, axes, gold pans, picks, shovels. And that's before you start thinking about luxuries like coffee or whiskey. Your pack doesn't have space for comfort. You're building a mobile apocalypse bunker one load at a time. There's a strange democracy on the trail. Rich, poor, educated, illiterate. Everyone's equally miserable. No one's carriage makes it up the mountain. Even if you could afford to bring horses, they won't help much. Horses break legs on the ice, or freeze, or starve. Eventually they just collapse, their bodies left where they fall. You've already passed one, ribs poking through skin like a Halloween display. A raven was perched on its skull, pecking at the frozen eye socket. You walked a little faster after that. Some people hire porters, natives mostly, Tlingit men who know the land and can carry absurd weights up the slope for a price, but they're expensive and they're not about to babysit anyone. If you can't keep up, you get left behind. It's as simple as that. One guy in your group, George, with the awful singing voice, gets swindled by a con man posing as a certified Alaskan trail guide. The guy takes $50, carries George's load 10 feet, and then disappears into the fog. George laughs it off at first. By sunset, he's sitting on a rock swearing to go back to Kansas. But not you. You keep hauling your flour sacks and beans one trip at a time. You learn how to wrap your shoulders to prevent the leather straps from tearing into your skin. You figure out how to melt snow for water without accidentally giving yourself trail sickness. You learn to hate bacon. Yes, it's possible. After week 2, you're so sick of the greasy, salty slabs that you start trading them for anything else. Someone offers you a bag of dried apples. You nearly weep with gratitude. One night around the campfire, Levi starts telling the story of a man who tried to carry all his gear in fewer trips. He loaded up with 200 pounds on his back, twice the normal amount, made it about half a mile before collapsing. Some said his legs just gave out and folded like cheap chairs. Others said the weight cracked his spine. Either way, he was found the next morning frozen solid, still clutching a sack of flour. They buried him with it. That same night you hear coyotes howling in the distance, but no one bothers to react. Everyone's too tired, too cold. You wrap your blanket tighter, turn over on the frozen ground, and dream of soft beds and hot baths, both of which feel further away than the moon. There's a weird kind of pride that starts to creep in. As your muscles harden and your hands turn to calloused claws, you begin to feel like you're actually adapting. Like you're not just surviving, you're conquering. You look at the new arrivals, all shiny and hopeful, and you shake your head. They have no idea what's coming. You smirk as they struggle to pitch tents in the wind or cook rice without setting their mittens on fire. You were that green once. Now, you're part of the mountain. There's even a word for people like you now, sourdough. Not the bread, though you'd commit a felony for a warm slice of it. It's slang for the seasoned veterans of the north, those who've endured at least one winter out here. The newcomers? They're chichacos, and every sourdough remembers being one. But just when you start feeling tough, the mountain reminds you who's boss. A sudden storm sweeps in one afternoon, turning the sky to slate and the ground to slush. Visibility drops to 10 feet. Thomas gets separated from the group, wanders off trail and ends up spending the night in a snowbank. When you find him the next day, his fingers are black at the tips. He jokes that he never liked gloves anyway, but you all know what's coming. By the next campfire you're heating a blade. Frostbite waits for no one. By now you've developed a kind of sixth sense for suffering. You can hear a collapsing spirit in someone's voice. You can smell the fear and desperation in the way they walk. And still, the line of people keeps moving up the trail, hundreds of them, like ants hauling crumbs across an endless mountain. And somehow, you're still one of them. You wake up with your boots frozen solid again, because of course you do. You've been storing them inside your tent, wrapped in your blanket, pressed against your body like a needy pet, and it still wasn't enough. Outside, the sky glows pale and cold. Somewhere in the distance, a pickaxe hits stone with a hollow clink, clink, clink that might as well be your morning alarm. Time to climb. Again. Today is the day you face it. The Golden Stairs. It's almost funny. Almost. The name makes it sound like some kind of enchanted stairway to a palace made of gold and dreams. You imagine velvet ropes and candlelight, but the Golden Stairs are none of that. They're a vertical mile of snow and ice steps carved straight into a mountainside, rising to the top of the Chilkoot Pass like a stairway to, well, not heaven. The ice steps were originally cut by earlier stampeders, those poor deranged pioneers who got here before the real rush hit. With every new snowstorm the steps vanish. Then someone has to recut them, again and again, like Sisyphus with a pickaxe. Now the stairs are a kind of communal punishment, shared by everyone who dares follow this trail. You arrive at the base of the slope mid-morning and it's a mess. Hundreds of men and women inching up a single-file line that stretches to the sky, each one hunched under a massive pack, each one miserable. It looks like some twisted ant parade, silent, slow, and straight up. You spot a man halfway up who seems to have stopped moving entirely, just frozen there, like someone hit pause. Welcome to the real bottleneck of the Chilkoot. Your group takes a break to assess the situation. Maggie immediately lights a cigarette, squinting at the sky like she might be able to stare it down. Levi pulls out a flask and takes a long, slow swig before handing it to you. It tastes like fire and medicine, and something possibly illegal. But you don't ask. You just drink. You're going to need it. When it's your turn, you begin the climb. Each step is an insult. Your pack feels heavier than ever, dragging you backward as you fight gravity and snow, and the growing awareness that your legs are slowly turning to jelly. People are coughing, cursing, praying under their breath. The trail is so narrow you can't stop or sit without holding up everyone behind you, and no one's feeling particularly charitable. A guy slips 3 steps below you and almost takes out 4 others on his way down. His sled crashes into a rock and explodes in a shower of bacon and beans. He screams something you're pretty sure isn't in the Bible. The stairs seem endless. Every time you think you're close to the top, the mountain laughs and adds another tier. The ice creaks and shifts beneath your boots. The cold is so sharp it makes your teeth ache. At some point you forget what you're even carrying. The pack on your back becomes part of your body like a shell. You just keep climbing, one freezing, wind-burned step at a time. You reach the top after hours of vertical agony, the summit of Chilkoot Pass. It doesn't feel like victory, it feels like a temporary pause in the punishment. The view is breathtaking, but not in a romantic postcard kind of way. It's more like, if I fall off this ridge, my body will roll for 2 miles and no one will even notice. You drop your load in the snow and sit down, your legs trembling, your face crusted with wind-chapped skin and sweat. The wind whips past like it wants to peel the flesh off your bones. And now, of course, you get to go back down for another load. You've done maybe 1/40th of the work. But hey, you're still breathing. That night, camped on the far side of the pass, you sit around a sputtering fire with your group and swap horror stories. Someone mentions a man who slipped on the stairs, tumbled down the whole way, and shattered his femur on the rocks. They had to leave him in a tent until a rescue party could be organised. It took 4 days. By the time help arrived, he was frostbitten from the waist down. They amputated both legs with a saw. No anaesthetic. He survived. Sort of. Then there's the couple who tried to bring their child, an infant. The baby froze during the second trip. They buried her under a pile of stones off the main path, wrapped in a wool blanket. There's no grave marker, just a small depression in the snow where the ground was disturbed. You pass it the next morning without even realising. And yet people keep coming. Every day new faces arrive. Exhausted, underprepared, wild-eyed optimists who think they're different. That they'll be the ones to make it. That the trail won't break them. That golden glory are just over the ridge. You see them dragging stoves, full-length mirrors, even musical instruments. Someone's got a cello strapped to a sled. Another guy is hauling a set of china plates. No one stops to tell them they're insane. What's the point? Some of them, of course, never make it over the pass. They break down midway, sit in the snow, cry, wait for rescue that never comes. Or they get sick. Something simple, like a cut that gets infected, or a bit of bad meat that turns into full-blown dysentery. The trail is full of half-built cairns and makeshift grave markers. People carry their hopes up the mountain, and sometimes they leave their bodies behind. There's a kind of whispered mythos that grows around the golden stairs. People say they hear voices in the wind when they climb. Whispers of those who died there. One guy swears he saw a ghostly figure standing at the summit, watching the line of climbers with a crooked grin. Another says the mountain itself wants you to fall, and you can feel it pressing against you with every gust of wind. You don't believe any of it, of course. Not really. But that doesn't stop you from muttering a little good luck charm before your next ascent. Just in case. By the 5th or 6th trip, your body's on autopilot. Pain becomes background noise. You no longer feel your toes. You're not sure if they're still there, to be honest. You just climb, load, descend, repeat. The line never ends. The trail never lets up. But with every trip, your cache grows. You're getting closer to the magic ton. And when, if, you make it past the pass with all your gear, you'll be allowed to continue north into the Yukon. The worst part will be behind you, they say. You try to believe that. You've officially lost count of how many trips you've made over the pass. Your memory's gone soft around the edges, like it's been left out in the snow too long. You know your boots hit the snow, you know your body moves, and you know that every load is followed by another, like the worst Groundhog Day ever filmed. The days blur, the food is always cold, and now your pack feels lighter, not because you're getting stronger, but because you're starting to lose track of how much you're actually hauling. Or maybe your arms have just gone numb for good. Then it happens. You're halfway down the pass on one of your routine returns when the stillness of the icy air cracks, shattered by a deep, low whoomp. It's a sound that doesn't register at first. It doesn't belong in your mental library, but the silence that follows, that does. That's the kind of silence you only hear before something truly awful. You look up. What you see is a massive wall of snow breaking loose from the upper ridges of the mountain. Just a blur of white until your brain catches up and slaps you with the realization. Avalanche. Someone yells. Others freeze. And then comes the chaos. You sprint sideways off the trail, stumbling over frozen rocks and abandoned gear. The snow roars like a freight train, louder and louder, until it's the only thing you can hear. You hit the ground behind a boulder, heart pounding, breath caught in your throat. The snowstorm thunders past you in a blur, chunks of ice and debris ripping down the trail like nature's own plough. When it's over, everything is silent again. But now it's the wrong kind of silence. The kind that feels like someone just turned the volume down on the world. You crawl out from behind the boulder. The trail's gone. Just gone. In its place is a jagged field of snow, packed tight like concrete. Sleds and sacks are scattered across the slope. A piece of someone's coat sticks out near a tree, fluttering like a flag. You're not sure if there's a person attached to it. You spend the rest of the afternoon digging. Everyone does. Tools, hands, boots, whatever you've got. The snow is so dense it feels like you're shoveling stone. Levi's missing. So is a teenager who'd been hiking solo the past few days, always smiling like this was all just one big adventure. You dig until your fingernails split and your arms give out. They pull Levi out just before nightfall. His pack is crushed flat, his ribs along with it. His eyes are open, frozen that way. You help build the cairn, placing rocks around his body until it's marked, just enough to warn future hikers what happened here, just enough to make you question everything. You're not sure what hurts more, your body or your brain. There's a weight on your chest heavier than any pack. It's the realization that no amount of skill or preparation matters out here. You can be strong, you can be smart, but one whoomp and you're gone, just like that, buried under 15 feet of snow with your name already forgotten. After that, the trail feels different. People speak more quietly. The jokes stop. There's no singing. Even Maggie, who usually fills the silence with half-sung saloon ballads, stops talking altogether. It's like the mountain is listening now and no one wants to tempt it again. Still, you keep going. Because what else can you do? You've come too far. You've invested everything. And now, with each trip, you grow closer to that fabled ton of supplies. That sacred weight that means the Mounties will let you pass. It becomes an obsession. You start tallying sacks like a miser counting coins. Every pound is a step closer to freedom from this frozen hellscape. But the deeper you get into this thing, the weirder it all becomes. One day, you meet a man who claims he's already struck gold. Real gold. He shows you a small pouch of flakes like it's the Holy Grail. Says he's just going back to bring his brother over the pass. You nod, smile, and keep walking. Then someone behind you whispers that the same man has been showing off that exact pouch for weeks. Stole it off a dead man's body, probably. Just another scam artist selling dreams for whiskey and boots. Oh, and the corpses. Yeah, those don't stop either. People die quietly out here. Hypothermia sneaks up like a thief. One day you're trudging along the trail and you spot a figure slumped against a tree, looking like he's just resting. You call out. No answer. You get closer and realize the guy's been dead for hours. Eyes open, frost clinging to his beard like sugar. Worse, some folks are using the dead for more than just ghost stories. Rumours spread of scavengers. People who pick over bodies for supplies, gold fillings, anything of value. One story claimed someone found a corpse with its jaw broken open, teeth missing. Another tells of a woman who wore a dead man's boots into Dawson and never took them off. The trail doesn't make you bad. It just strips away everything polite that used to cover up the bad. By this point, the dream that got you started, the idea of riches, freedom, and glory, has melted into something smaller, colder, more desperate. Now, you just want to reach the end of the trail, to survive. You fantasize less about gold and more about a hot bath, a full night's sleep, a cup of coffee that doesn't taste like boiled pine needles. Still, there are moments, brief, almost sacred, where you remember why you started. The night sky, for instance. On clear nights, it stretches across the mountains like a frozen ocean of stars. There's no city glow to block it, no noise to interrupt it. Just an endless black dome glittering with light. You lie back in the snow, bones aching, and for a second, it feels like you're floating. Like all the pain and madness might be worth it. And then the wind shifts, the cold returns, and you're back in your body, bruised, broken, and still not done hauling your gear. By week 5, the cache is almost complete. You and Maggie double-check the supplies together, item by item. Flour, check bacon, check enough matches to burn down a saloon, check. You both stand there, silent for a long time, staring at the pile. You don't say it, but it's obvious. You've done it. You've got the ton. Now comes the real test. Facing the Mounties at the border. They're the final gatekeepers. No-nonsense types in red serge uniforms who look like they eat trail cheetahs for breakfast. You approach their camp at the summit with your team, nerves rattling. One officer nods, takes your paperwork and starts checking the gear. It's not just formality. They've turned people back for being £50 short. One guy tried to hide extra sacks of flour in the snow to look like he had enough. They caught him, banned him for life. But today, you pass. They wave you through. You're in. You stand there at the top of the pass looking out over the Yukon Territory and feel nothing. Not joy, not relief. Just the kind of numb that comes from knowing the worst is probably over. You start the descent. And ahead of you, a whole new nightmare waits. The descent into the Yukon is not the victory lap you imagined. It's steeper than it looks, and slipperier too. Your knees throb with every step. Your boots slide even when you're standing still. And the trail down is littered with what people call trail trash. The bones of bad decisions, broken sleds, shattered crates, a single boot frozen into the ground like some sad monument, and of course, the smell. Rancid bacon grease, wet wool, unwashed bodies, and something else. Sour, metallic, lingering. The trail doesn't let you forget where you are, or how many people didn't make it. The first major camp you reach after the pass is Lake Lindeman. From a distance it looks peaceful. Frozen blue water, white-tipped trees, tents dotted along the shore like a painting. But up close, it's a buzzing, frantic mess. People are chopping trees, sawing planks, hammering together boats, like it's a shipyard run by lunatics. Because now it's boat season. See, the trail might be behind you, but you're not even close to Dawson City yet. That's still hundreds of miles away, through winding rivers, unpredictable rapids, and miles of uncharted wilderness. So here at Lindeman and later at Bennett Lake, thousands of stampeders become amateur shipbuilders overnight. The Gold Rush has officially shifted from a mountain survival game to a floating, freezing disaster in waiting. You don't know anything about boats, but that doesn't matter. No one does. A few lucky souls manage to buy pre-cut kits from Seattle, flat-bottomed skiffs you can assemble with some nails and determination. Others, like you, grab an axe and start hacking trees like they know what they're doing. You've never built a doghouse, and now you're expected to build a river-worthy vessel? Sure, why not? Add it to the list of bad decisions made for the sake of gold. The mood around camp is different here. Not necessarily better, but changed. People are still tired, still starving, still sleeping in snow-crusted tents, but there's something like hope in the air again. It smells like pine and sawdust and desperation. Men sing while they work. Women barter over who gets the next pot of boiling water. One guy is building what he swears is a steam-powered raft. Even though no one's seen a boiler anywhere nearby, you stop asking questions. And then there's the food situation. If you thought trail food was bad, lake camp food is somehow worse. You're down to the dregs of your rations. Flour with weevils in it, bacon that's more rind than meat, tea that tastes like someone boiled moss. But you make do. Every bite is fuel. People trade what little luxuries they have left. A man offers a tin of peaches for a wool sock. Another trades a small sack of coffee for 2 nails. And don't even get started on the price of whiskey. A single bottle could buy you a seat on someone else's boat. Or, if you're Maggie, buy enough favours to build your own. You and Maggie decide to build together. It makes sense. She's good with tools and you're there. Moral support counts. Levi would have helped too, but every time you catch yourself thinking that, you feel a cold twist in your gut. So you focus on the raft. It's barely more than a box on logs, but it floats. Mostly. That's what counts. At night, people gather around campfires and tell stories. Some are real, others pure invention. There's talk of a man who built a full sailboat, painted it gold, and vanished the moment it touched water. Another tells of a woman who disguised herself as a man for the entire trail, only to be outed during a brawl over a loaf of bread. The stories are a mix of awe and warning, half ghost tale, half instruction manual. And then there's the guy with the bacon tower. You hear about him your second week at Lake Lindeman. Some man, recently arrived, apparently thought the Canadian authorities were bluffing about the ton of supplies and only brought 300 pounds, including 200 pounds of bacon. That was it. No flour, no tools, no warm clothing. Just an irrational belief in bacon's power to get him through anything. People start calling him Bacon Jim. You're not even sure he exists until one day you spot a man sitting proudly atop a stack of greasy crates, slicing bacon with a pocket knife like it's a fine steak. Is he insane? Probably. Is he going to die? Almost certainly. Still, there's something admirable about it. A weird kind of tragic optimism. You know deep down you'll never forget Bacon Jim. Building the boat takes longer than it should, but somehow you get it done. It's ugly. It leans slightly to the left. One side is patched with a sheet of flattened tin that used to be a stove lid, but it's yours. You name it the Maybe. Not out of irony, but because that's genuinely how you feel. Maybe it floats, maybe it doesn't, maybe you survive, maybe not. The lake thaws slowly. Weeks pass in a muddy blur. The first signs of spring show up like awkward guests. Tiny wildflowers poking out of snowbanks, a few birds that don't sound like they're screaming. The ice on the lake starts cracking, groaning under the weight of change. It's like the land is reluctantly waking up. And then, one morning, the ice is gone. Just gone. The lake is water again, the river is moving, and the camp explodes into motion. It's launch day. Hundreds of boats take off in a mad dash. The lake churns with everything from rafts to actual steamboats, cobbled together by lunatics with more money than sense. People shout, row, paddle, crash into each other. It's nautical chaos. You and Maggie push off into the current, your boat creaking, your muscles burning from the effort. You look back at the camp and realize you'll probably never see it again. As the shoreline fades, you feel something unexpected. Not fear, not joy, but freedom. You survived the deadliest trail in North America. You carried a literal ton of supplies over a mountain, and now you're headed north, into a new kind of wilderness. The river rushes around you, cold and quick, and all you can do is hold the tiller and hope the maybe lives up to its name. For now, you float. Your first night on the river is like sleeping on top of a jittery horse with trust issues. The maybe creaks constantly, groaning with every small wave, like it knows something you don't. You tie it off along the shore, half expecting to wake up downstream with nothing but a plank and Maggie's hat floating beside you. But no, miraculously you survive the night. The boat survives too, spirits are up, briefly. By day 2, the Yukon has you in its teeth. The current pulls you faster than you expected, and you quickly learn that steering a homemade boat is less of an art and more of a full-time crisis. Maggie handles the oars like she's been training for this her whole life, but even she's swearing under her breath within minutes. You've barely eaten, your hands are cracked and bleeding from the cold water, and your arms are already noodles. But none of that matters, because there's something far more terrifying around the next bend. The Whitehorse Rapids. You've heard rumours since Dyer, about the roar of the water. The boat splintered like firewood. The bodies never recovered. Everyone talks about the rapids with the same breathless reverence they used for the Chilkoot Pass, like it's not just a river hazard, but a character in this story. A living, thrashing beast that wants to end you. And it almost does. You spot the churning white foam long before you hear it. The sound builds slowly, first like wind, then like a waterfall, then like the world itself is coming undone. The banks narrow, the current tightens its grip, and suddenly you're caught in the pull. Maggie yells something. You're not even sure what. All you know is the front of the boat lifts, just a little, just enough, and then slams back down with a force that knocks the breath from your lungs. Water floods the floor, ice cold and angry. Your supplies shift violently, a sack of beans slapping you in the face like some kind of cruel cartoon. You bail with a tin pot, cursing every life choice that led you to this moment. The rapids don't last long, maybe 20 seconds, maybe an hour. Time folds in on itself when death seems imminent. But when it's over, and you're somehow still afloat, you look back at the frothing water, like a survivor from a shipwreck. The maybe has a new crack in the side, your frying pan is gone forever, and Maggie's hair is standing completely on end. But you're alive. A lot of people weren't so lucky. You pass wreckage downriver, a splintered hull, a piece of tarp, a boot. On shore, a small crowd is building beside a capsized boat. You see a man kneeling in the mud, cradling a woman's soaked shawl. No words, just silence, the kind you don't interrupt. Later that night, the campfire is quieter than usual. People who'd been loud and cocky days earlier now stare into the flames like they're waiting for answers. One man mutters that the rapids claimed 8 lives that day. Another says it was 12. A woman chimes in that her group left Lindemann with 10 people and 2 boats. Only one boat made it. No one asks about the others. And then there's the story of the Palm Sunday avalanche. Someone brings it up while you're eating half-burnt bannock, and suddenly your appetite fades. It happened just a few weeks before you crossed the Chilkoot, and the details hit like a punch in the ribs. Over 100 people buried in snow, some killed instantly, others suffocated in seconds. The trail clogged with bodies, entire camps flattened, a mule team crushed mid-step. They say the mountain just let go, all at once, a wall of snow hundreds of feet thick. There were too many people on the trail that day, too many loads, too much noise, and the mountain had had enough. The worst part? Most of them were nameless, just hopefuls with sacks of flour and a dream. After the avalanche, the Mounties forced people to dig graves. They assigned numbers to the bodies, tagged boots with chalk, stacked coffins like cargo. The Gold Rush had become a funeral march. You sit in silence after that, staring at the river. It's calm now, which somehow feels more ominous. You're learning to read the land in a different way, not just for direction or food, but for moods. The river is quiet, yes, but it's not at peace. It's resting, waiting for another chance to pull someone under. Maggie breaks the silence by asking you the question you've been avoiding. Why are you really here? You start to say the usual: gold, adventure, freedom. But none of it feels true anymore. You settle on, I didn't want to die in the same town I was born in. She nods, says nothing. That's the thing out here. Truths don't need decoration. They just hang in the air like steam and slowly disappear. The next stretch of river takes you through Miles Canyon, another death trap. You've learned to spot danger by sound now, and the canyon whistles like a warning. Sheer rock walls on either side, water swirling and dark. You see boats trying to turn around and failing, paddles snapping, people yelling. One guy jumps overboard with a rope and tries to tow his boat manually along the rocks. You're not sure whether that's brave or suicidal. Maybe both. You and Maggie go through on your knees, praying your boat holds. She's gripping the oars like they're the only things anchoring her to the world. You bail with the lid of your cooking pot. Your last one. The water's deep and quick and cold, but somehow the maybe holds again. By the time you make it out of the canyon, your hands are purple and raw, your lips cracked, and your supplies soggy, but you're alive. Again. You make camp further downriver, this time in a quieter spot. You finally change your socks, an act so divine it brings actual tears. You eat the last of your salt pork and count your bruises like badges. Maggie says she wants to rename the boat. Something tougher, something that fits. You agree. The maybe has earned it. You scrawl the new name onto the side with a piece of charcoal, the probably not. And yet, the boat keeps going. You drift through silent stretches of river, past thick forests and rising peaks. At times, it's beautiful. Jaw-dropping, even. You spot moose at the shorelines, eagles wheeling overhead. The water reflects the sky like glass. It's easy to forget for a moment how many people have died trying to see this exact view. Easy to forget how far you still have to go. But night comes fast, and with it, the wind. You wrap yourself in your blanket, stare at the stars, and wonder what fresh terror tomorrow's stretch of river will bring. You hit the river again at dawn, the mist curling low like it's trying to hide the day from you. The air is sharp, crisp enough to sting your nostrils with every breath, and the sky's the colour of cold steel. The probably not floats steady for now, though one of the planks on the starboard side looks like it's starting to pull away from the frame. You make a mental note to patch it. Later, maybe, if you're still alive. As the Yukon snakes north, you pass other boats, some drifting quietly like ghosts, others pulled ashore in haphazard repairs. One is fully capsized, the keel poking up like a spine. You squint and see someone sitting nearby, just staring at the wreckage with his back to the river. There's a half-eaten can of beans next to him. You consider stopping. You don't. Later you start to see people you recognize. Not friends exactly, but familiar trail faces. The woman with the blue scarf who carried her tent rolled like a sushi mat. The guy with the limp and the loud opinions about gold purity. The brothers from Oregon who argued non-stop about whether to pack a second pickaxe. Everyone's a little greyer now, a little thinner, a little quieter. The river is turning you all into a different breed of human. Feral, focused, half-starved and fully committed. Then, to one evening, you pull into a riverside camp and discover the ancient Yukon rivalry has arrived in full force. Sourdoughs versus Chichakos. You've heard the term since the start, murmured between locals or slapped onto travellers with disdain. A Chichako is someone new, someone green, someone who still thinks they're smarter than nature. A sourdough is the opposite, grizzled, seasoned, cynical, and usually still breathing. The camp is divided like a high school cafeteria. On one side, the sourdoughs, clustered near the fire with their hand-sewn mittens and reindeer hide coats. On the other, the Chichakos, surrounded by shiny new gear, city talk, and mismatched boots. You and Maggie stand somewhere in the middle, Technically you're Chilkoot's, but you've survived Chilkoot, you've survived the rapids, you've earned at least junior status. Still, you feel the eyes on you when you approach the fire. The sourdoughs have a look, weathered faces, hard-set jaws, and eyes that say, "I've buried people." One of them is stirring a pot of something grey and steamy. Could be stew, could be socks, hard to tell. You nod politely. He grunts. That's probably the warmest welcome you're getting tonight. The tension between the two groups isn't just about pride, it's about survival. The sourdoughs don't trust the newcomers because the newcomers make mistakes. They pitch tents in flood zones. They overload their boats. They pack things like folding chairs and porcelain dishes, then panic when the river demands an ounce of sense. One story you hear that night is about a Chilkoot who brought an entire brass bed frame. Said it was for his back. He and the bed both went into the Yukon somewhere past Miles Canyon. Neither came back. Another story from the sourdough with the sock stew involves a greenhorn who ignored every warning and tried to make his own trail through a patch of marshland. He lost 2 sled dogs, a week's worth of supplies, and a toe before he dragged himself back to the main route. They found him trying to boil willow bark for dinner. Despite the rivalry, you see something else glimmering beneath all the side-eye and grunted warnings. Respect, quietly forming. The sourdoughs talk tough, but they're watching. Not just you, but all the survivors. They're waiting to see if you fold or if you learn, and you do learn. You and Maggie improve your boat repairs, patch leaks with pine pitch and boot leather. You figure out how to cook a tolerable stew with mouldy beans and stale biscuits. You even develop a routine, switching paddling duties, sharing lookout shifts, taking turns staying grumpy so at least one of you has a sense of humour at all times. There's a rhythm now, a miserable, exhausting rhythm. Wake up half frozen, shake snow off your blanket, boil something regrettable, check the boat, paddle bail, paddle again, camp, repeat. But every so often something breaks the pattern, like the day you find the man with the violin. It's midday. The sun is low, barely bothering to warm anything, and you're pulled off the riverbank to fix a split in one of the boat's ribs. That's when you hear it. Music. Actual, live music. Soft, shaky, but unmistakably a violin playing a mournful tune. You follow the sound and find a young man sitting on a crate, eyes closed, bow moving gently across the strings. His boots are in tatters, his cheeks are hollow. But he plays like he remembers who he used to be. You sit and listen. So does Maggie. So does a sourdough with a scar running from his ear to his collarbone. No one speaks. The song finishes and no one claps. It's not that kind of moment. You just nod. The violinist nods back. Then you return to your repairs, and for a little while things feel human again. But the wilderness never lets you forget for long. That night a storm barrels down the river valley. Rain, hail, wind that howls like wolves with megaphones. You wake up to your tent half collapsed, Maggie already outside trying to secure the boat. You help her tie it down with every scrap of rope you've got, praying it holds. It does, but barely. Downstream, someone wasn't as lucky. A half-sunken skiff is lodged between 2 boulders, supplies bobbing beside it. No sign of the owner. In the days that follow, the camps grow smaller. People disappear. Some make it ahead. Others vanish in the woods, give up, or become cautionary tales whispered between half-asleep travellers. You start to feel the difference between Chilkoots and sourdoughs in your own body. The cold doesn't bite quite as hard now. Your hands stop shaking when you patch leaks in the boat. Your back adjusts to the stiff mornings. Even your face, once soft and flushed, is now weather-chapped and sharp at the edges. You've become something else. Not quite a veteran, but no longer naive. At one stop, a Mountie asks where you're coming from, and when you say dear, he raises an eyebrow. And you're still alive? You smile, it surprises you. Yes, you say, still. And the thing is, he doesn't laugh. By the time you reach the next major camp, it's not so much a town as it is a beautiful disaster. Tarps flapping in the wind, empty bottles strewn in the snow, a man shouting about flapjacks while another plays cards on top of an overturned coffin. You've arrived in one of the many tent cities that pop up along the trail, temporary hubs of chaos, commerce and questionable decisions. This one's called Canyon City, though city might be the most generous part of its name. It's hard to explain the vibe here without using the words mud, alcohol and poor life choices. People aren't just passing through, they're stuck. Some are waiting for the ice to break on the river, others are nursing injuries, and a A few just gave up here entirely, cracked open a bottle and decided this patch of frozen earth is as far as they're going to get. You pull the probably knot onto shore, tie it down tight, and take stock of your supplies. Not great. You're down to a few sacks of flour, some mouldy dried apples, and a bit of lard that's mostly frozen into an unrecognisable lump. So naturally you head into town. The first thing that hits you is the noise. There's a kind of humming chaos in the air, shouting, laughing, crying, occasional gunshots that don't seem to concern anyone. The second thing is the smell. Sweat. Horses, pipe smoke, and old socks that someone tried to cover with cologne. It doesn't work. There's a saloon, of course. There's always a saloon. This one is just a big tent with a hand-painted sign that reads the Golden Gizzard. Inside, it's packed wall-to-wall with prospectors, trappers, gamblers, and women in feathered hats serving drinks that taste like fermented ashtrays. Maggie ducks under the flap and comes out 5 minutes later, holding 2 mugs and looking vaguely amused. You sit on an overturned barrel and sip your drink, which may or may not be made from tree sap and kerosene. It burns all the way down, but for a few seconds you don't feel the cold. That's when you notice how many people are just stuck here. Tent cities like this are built on the idea of motion, of people coming and going, but some never leave. They show up full of ambition and freeze in place like broken gears in the machine. Their money runs out, their health fails, or they just decide that the idea of another 500 miles is too much. You walk past tents with for sale signs scribbled on them. Others have been torn down and turned into firewood. You pass a man with a wooden leg carving a flute out of a stick. You hear someone offering to trade dental work for boots, and not their dental work. You get the impression they might just yank the teeth out themselves and call it a day. There's a medic's tent near the edge of the camp. Doctor is a loose term here. He's really just the guy with the cleanest hands and a set of pliers. You hear him explaining loudly how to amputate a toe with whiskey and a carving knife. You walk faster. Back in town, trade is everywhere. People are hawking everything. Bacon, boots, fake maps to gold claims. One man is selling Klondike miracle mud that's definitely just dirt with glitter in it. A woman tries to sell Maggie a pair of fur mittens made from what she claims is rare Arctic chinchilla. You don't ask questions, you just keep moving. You find a man offering to read fortunes. His setup is impressively dramatic. Candles, a deck of cards, a stuffed raven perched on his shoulder. You pay him a dime for a reading. He flips a few cards, looks at you and says, "You'll reach gold, but it won't be what you think." You ask what that means, and he just grins, then points at the next person in line. The thing is, tent cities like this one are both a warning and a necessity. They're cautionary tales, living reminders that the trail doesn't just kill with cold or cliffs, it kills with inertia. You stop moving, even for a little while, and you might never start again. But at the same time, you need these stops. You need a break from the river. You need supplies. You need human contact that doesn't involve shouting over wind and holding your bladder in a snowstorm. That night, you set up your tent a little ways outside the main camp. You want the noise close enough to feel human, but far enough to sleep. Maggie's already out cold, boots still on, one arm slung over a sack of flour like it's a teddy bear. You lie awake for a while, listening. There's music, if you can call it that. A fiddle played badly, a harmonica that's probably more rust than metal. People laughing, someone arguing about a rigged poker game, the occasional sound of a man being punched in the face. And under all of that, the low hum of the river still moving, still pulling north. In the morning, it takes you longer than usual to pack up. The mud is thick and sucking, and the probably not has frozen slightly into the riverbank. You chip it free with a small axe and try not to think about how much damage you're doing to the hull. As you push off, you notice something along the shoreline. A small wooden cross tied together with twine, half buried in the snow. A boot sits next to it, filled with frozen flowers. No name, just a reminder. Back on the river, the tent city vanishes behind the bend. Already it feels like a dream, rowdy, smoky, foul and fleeting. You glance at Maggie, who's chewing something that looks like jerky and may actually be leather. She nods toward the bow. You think we're halfway there yet? You laugh, but it comes out more like a wheeze. Halfway to what? She shrugs. Whatever's left. You float in silence after that. The river grows narrower again, the trees closing in like ribs around a spine. Somewhere up ahead, another camp waits. Another fire. Another cross, maybe. Another chance to keep moving or stop forever. For now you paddle. By now the rhythm of the river is embedded in your bones. Each day a rolling blend of paddling, bailing, dodging and praying. But today's different. Today, you approach a stretch of land that people have warned you about since long before the Chilkoot. They call it Deadliest Trail. Not poetically, not metaphorically. It is exactly what it sounds like. It begins as a faint smell on the wind, something foul and sweet, like rotting meat doused in pine sap. Then you start to see the shapes along the shore. Dark, bloated mounds half buried in the snow, flies clinging to the thawing patches of fur. Some are just piles of bones now, scattered and picked clean. Others are frozen whole, mouths open mid-scream, hooves stuck out like they're still trying to run. Welcome to White Pass. If the Chilkoot was brutal, White Pass is downright apocalyptic. It was the other way into the Klondike, shorter in theory, but steeper, narrower, and soaked with misery. It earned the nickname Deadliest Trail during the height of the Gold Rush, when stampeders by the thousands drove their pack animals to death trying to beat the crowds and make time. Horses weren't meant for these conditions. Narrow paths, ice-covered cliffs, bottomless mud holes, and when the animals collapsed from exhaustion or slipped off the cliffs, they were left where they fell. Some people tried to salvage gear from the corpses, cutting saddle straps from dead flesh, yanking packs from twisted bodies. Others just moved on. There were too many to bury, too many to mourn. Over 3,000 horses died along this trail in less than a year, a massacre by neglect. You and Maggie pull the boat ashore near the start of the pass, not because you want to stop here, but because you have to. There's a trading camp nearby, and your gear's running low. The walk into camp is grim. You pass more carcasses along the trail, some half buried under rocks and snow, others strung with warning signs. Don't push your luck. No load worth a life. This trail eats everything. The camp itself is a stripped-down skeleton of the bigger tent cities. Just a few supply tents, a blacksmith hammering at a bent horseshoe, and a saloon with no walls, just a tarp and a whiskey barrel serving as the bar. Most of the people here look half broken, like they came expecting a shortcut and got a horror movie instead. You meet a man named Elliot who says he came up the pass a week ago. He lost 2 mules and nearly lost his own leg in a rock slide. He shows you the scar, a jagged lightning bolt down his shin, still fresh and weeping. He tells you how he had to shoot one of his animals after it collapsed in a snowdrift, and that he can still hear it screaming when he sleeps. He says it matter-of-factly, as if recounting a poor dice roll. Then he takes another sip of something that smells like turpentine and disappears back into the mist. At night the wind screams through the pass like a haunted choir. It doesn't whistle. It howls, long and low, like the sound of something mourning. You don't sleep well. How could you? Your tent rattles. Your boots freeze again. And just beyond the edge of your camp you swear you hear something moving. Something that doesn't walk like a man. In the morning you find new tracks in the snow, not wolves, bigger. Someone says they belong to a moose, but you're not convinced. You and Maggie pack up quickly. This is not a place to linger. As you paddle away from the trailhead you glance back one last time. There's a fresh carcass on the slope now, just collapsed overnight, steam still rising from its body. Someone probably tried to make the pass again, despite all the signs, all the stories, all the ghosts, and now there's one more. White Pass becomes a cautionary tale you carry with you, not just about cruelty, but about greed, about what happens when people treat life, any life, as disposable. You don't talk about it much after that, neither does Maggie. It just sits between you and the boat, cold and heavy and unspoken. You keep moving, weaving through the narrowing river like a needle through thread. The scenery gets wilder here. Steeper cliffs, sharper bends, the trees packed in like soldiers on parade. The river has moods, angry, lazy, bitter, calm. You learn to read it like a face. When it's glassy, you know a storm is coming. When it chatters, you know rocks are near. You stop trusting maps. The land doesn't care what paper says. Along the way you run into a man with no boat, just a pack, a rifle, and a face like a worn-out boot. He says he gave up on water travel 2 weeks ago after his raft shattered in a minor rapid. Now he walks the riverbanks, camping where he can, hoping to reach Dawson before the freeze. You ask how long he thinks that'll take. He shrugs. Depends who kills me first, the cold or boredom. You give him a sack of dried apples and he nods once, says nothing, then vanishes into the trees. Further downriver the camps start getting more spaced out. You'll go days without seeing another soul. It's just you, Maggie, the current, and the sound of your own teeth grinding. The silence gets thicker too. It's no longer peaceful, it's oppressive, like the land is waiting for something. Then one evening you hear something strange. Laughter. Real laughter. You round a bend and spot a riverside camp lit up with lanterns, music echoing from a makeshift phonograph, and a group of half-frozen maniacs dancing around a fire. You pull in, exhausted, hungry, confused. Turns out it's someone's birthday. A sourdough who made it up to Dawson last year and decided to come back for one more try. He didn't find gold, but he found company, friends, a little whiskey, and today that's enough. You eat stew. Real stew with meat and potatoes. Someone hands you a warm biscuit. Maggie plays cards. You sit by the fire and let the warmth soak into your skin like a miracle. For a few hours the trail fades away. The corpses, the passes, the aching muscles, they vanish behind firelight and shared food and stories told with slurred, happy voices. But when the fire dies and the music slows and the phonograph runs out of crank, the night returns with its usual edge, and you remember again where you are, but you're not done yet. You wake up with biscuit crumbs on your shirt and a squirrel trying to chew through your pack. The fire's just a pile of glowing coals now, and the party from last night is reduced to groaning, hung-over bodies scattered across the riverside like the aftermath of a small, well-fed battle. Maggie's already awake, sitting on a rock and sharpening her knife, eyes scanning the tree line like she's expecting something. When you ask what she's looking for, she shrugs and says, "Just trying not to get scammed today." You both laugh, but not because it's funny, because it's inevitable. Scams are the one thing more abundant than snow in the Klondike, and by now you've learned that if you're breathing, someone's probably trying to rip you off. The gold rush is less a search for treasure and more a festival of fraud, and here on the trail, after weeks of frostbite, starvation, and sleeping with one eye open, it's no surprise that people have started turning to more creative methods of survival. It starts small. You meet a man offering gold claim stakes for a patch of river he doesn't own and has never seen. He's got maps, papers, even a little model of the land made from carved soap. Looks official. He promises it's an untapped vein, and when Maggie asks how he knows, he says, "The ravens told me." You decline. He shrugs and turns to the next group behind you. Further downriver, you run into a kid selling surefire directions to a secret shortcut, one that supposedly shaves 3 days off your journey. You pay him with a tin of tea and follow the trail, which leads straight into a swamp full of knee-deep muck and mosquitoes the size of mice. By nightfall, you're back on the main path, tea gone, pride wounded. And then there's the guy selling powdered soap that's actually just ground chalk, or the woman charging fortune fees to tell you if your boat will survive the next rapid. She says your vessel is cursed, offers to bless it for a silver dollar. Maggie asks if the blessing includes repairs. The woman says no. You pass. It's not just the strangers either. At one riverside post you catch a man trying to slip a few extra pounds of your flour into his own pack, while you're distracted by some dispute about moose tracks. When confronted, he apologizes and says he thought it was his flour. You know it's not. You packed it yourself. You mark your sacks from then on with charcoal. 3 slashes, always in the same spot. Even trade becomes a gamble. Someone offers you fresh bacon, still wrapped in burlap and dripping with grease. You open it later and find it's half maggots, half mould. The rest of it? Rocks. You quickly learn that trust is as scarce as comfort out here, and it makes sense. Everyone's chasing a dream that gets further away the closer you get. Every mile reveals a new truth. The Klondike is not paved with gold. It's paved with ruined shoes, lost teeth and broken promises. But the scams aren't always malicious. Some are just desperate. You meet a man in his 60s with cracked glasses and frostbitten fingers, trying to trade poetry for bread. Actual poetry. He's written a collection about the Yukon, neatly bound in string. His voice shakes when he reads a passage about the silence of the snow. You give him the rest of your dried apricots. He cries. You pretend not to notice. Others try to sell you miracle tonics, cough syrups that restore warmth to the soul, elixirs that repel bears and misfortune. There's one particularly enthusiastic guy who swears by a tonic made of spruce sap, river water, and Yukon moon minerals. He's missing 3 teeth and smells like fermented carrots. You politely decline, but Maggie buys a bottle, says she's keeping it as a souvenir, just in case we need to poison someone. One evening you encounter something new. Gold dust cons. You'd heard whispers about them before, but hadn't seen one in action until now. A man sits beside the river with a tin pan, swirling sediment like he's auditioning for a silent film. You watch, sceptical. Then, flash. He lifts the pan, and it glitters in the light. Actual gold. He stands, triumphant, waving a few specks for all to see. A crowd gathers. Soon people are offering him gear, supplies, even cash in exchange for directions to his lucky spot. But you've read about this one in some ragged trail papers. It's called salting. He brought the gold with him, shaved off coins or stolen from someone else's claim, sprinkled it in just to make a scene, draw a crowd, fleece the hungry. By morning he's gone, and so is half the camp's best equipment. You start noticing more of these scenes, men striking gold in the open, then disappearing in the night. Lucky spots that produce nothing, fortunes that crumble in your hands like dried moss. And maybe that's the cruelest part of the gold rush. Not the cold, not the trail, not the deaths. It's the constant illusion. The idea that the next bend, the next camp, the next claim will finally pay off. And every time you think you're too smart to fall for it, you find yourself staring at someone else's glittering dust, wondering if this time it's real. You and Maggie start developing a code for spotting trouble. If she says someone's too shiny, it means they're lying. If you say someone smells like gold, it means they've probably just been handling brass. You start walking a little further from the camps, keeping your gear closer, and trusting people only as far as you can throw a pan of beans. Still, you can't escape the constant sales pitch. The wilderness may be merciless, but it's also strangely capitalistic. Every fire has someone offering something. You hear a guy trying to sell fireproof matches. Maggie snorts and asks for a demonstration. The guy pauses, then says, "They're so safe, I won't even light them." You keep walking. But it's not all schemes and cons. Occasionally someone gives without asking. A cup of tea from a stranger, a blanket shared by the fire, a warning about a bad stretch of river ahead. Little flashes of humanity like lighthouses in a fog of grift. One night, as you camp near a small creek, a woman joins you, old, silent, and carrying nothing but a weathered Bible and a rusted tin kettle. She doesn't speak much, just nods when you offer her a place near the fire. She shares tea from her kettle. You share a bit of bread. Before she sleeps, she quietly says, "We all get lost out here. Just don't forget which part of you is still human." Then she closes her eyes and starts snoring like a bear. You don't see her again after that, but the words stick with you. The next morning you push off from shore, your supplies just a little lower, your shoulders just a little stiffer. The scams, the games, the noise of it all, they're behind you now, for the moment. But the Yukon keeps going, and so do you, because at this point, what else is there? You're 2 months into this adventure now, though adventure is starting to feel like a generous term. Endurance test might be more accurate. Your hands are permanently blistered, your legs ache like they've aged 50 years, and you're pretty sure your boots are held together entirely by frozen mud and silent prayers. You've seen avalanches bury people, rapids tear apart boats, and now, after passing another crude grave marked by a rusted cooking pot and a name carved into driftwood, it hits you. A lot of the people on this trail aren't men. A surprising number of them are women. And some of them? Well, they're surviving even harder than you are. You meet one of them just after another narrow bend in the river, where you pull off to avoid a jam of stranded boats. Maggie notices her first. A woman crouched in the snow near a low-burning fire, sharpening a hatchet with calm efficiency. Her face is hard to read. Brown eyes, wind-burned skin, jaw tight. She looks like someone who doesn't waste words or time. Maggie introduces herself, and the woman replies simply, "Annie." No last name, no backstory, just that. But as you sit and share coffee that tastes suspiciously like boiled tree bark, she opens up piece by piece. She came up from San Francisco, didn't come for gold, came to find her husband. He left a year ago chasing riches and hadn't written since. She made it over White Pass with a sled dog team, 2 of which died on the second day. She buried them herself, marked their graves with chunks of broken shovel. Now she's working her way to Dawson. If she finds him, great. If she doesn't, she shrugs. At least I'll know. Annie is not alone. As you keep moving north, you start noticing more women on the trail, not just tagging along, but leading their own teams, commanding their own boats, hauling gear, cooking, trading, and surviving in ways that make you feel vaguely embarrassed by your earlier breakdown over frozen socks. You meet a madam named Clara in one of the riverside trading posts. Her camp is organised with military precision. Everything's labelled, stacked, and tarped against the wind. She runs a hospitality tent. Curtains, rugs, a wood-burning stove, and the smell of perfume somehow stronger than the nearby latrines. She offers you tea and tells you her girls are making more money than most prospectors. They come for the gold, she says, lighting a cigarette with a practiced flick, but they pay for warmth, and someone to look them in the eyes like they're not ghosts. You ask her if she's afraid of the law, she laughs. Honey, the law's just another man with cold fingers out here. Clara's girls are tough too. One of them, Helen, shows you how to start a fire in the snow using a chunk of pitch and a scrap of silk. Learned that one from a trapper who thought I'd be impressed, she says, rolling her eyes. I was. So I robbed him. Not every woman you meet is part of the entertainment trade, though. You pass a pair of sisters pulling their own sled along the riverbank. Wooden runners, rope harnesses, everything homemade. Their father died somewhere near Lake Bennett. They're carrying his gear north to finish what he started. When you ask how they're holding up, one of them shrugs and says, "We've eaten worse." There's also a nurse named May travelling with a group of sourdoughs. She patches wounds, pulls teeth, and administers medicinal whiskey from a flask shaped like a Bible. One of the old-timers swears she reset his shoulder using just a bootlace, and a profanity so strong it frightened the bones back into place. But not everyone believes women belong out here. In one camp, you overhear a heated argument between a grimy prospector and a woman in buckskin pants and a revolver belt. He's shouting about proper roles and how the trail ain't no place for a lady. She calmly unholsters her revolver, fires a warning shot into the dirt between his feet, and then asks, "Which way did you say Dawson was?" The man stammers and points north. She tips her hat and walks away, boots crunching in the snow like punctuation marks. You and Maggie just look at each other and burst out laughing. No one messes with that kind of confidence. But it's not just the tough-as-nails types out here. There are mothers with toddlers strapped to their backs, widows hoping to stake claims of their own, and women who fled bad marriages with nothing but a map and a good pair of boots. They walk beside the men, sleep in the same freezing tents, and face the same hunger and cold and danger, and somehow they make it work. There's a scholarly debate about whether women were better suited for the trail than men. Some historians argue that statistically they were less likely to die of stupidity, like deciding to ford a river at night with a broken compass, or eating spoiled pork out of sheer bravado. Others say that women simply didn't have the luxury of falling apart. They had to keep going because no one was going to rescue them. Whatever the reason, you start to understand that the story of the Klondike isn't just men with pickaxes and muddy beards, it's also women with steel spines and quiet determination. Maggie, of course, has known this all along. She doesn't talk much about where she came from, but one evening while you're fixing a rip in the tent, she opens up. Says she left Boston after her husband tried to sell her inheritance for a stake in a fake claim. She took the rest of the money and bought a ticket north. Figured I'd rather die cold and free than warm and owned, she says. You just nod. There's nothing to add to that. And in a way, that's what this whole frozen nightmare is about. Not just the gold, not just the survival, but the freedom to rewrite your own story, to leave behind the person you were in the cities, in the parlours, in the factories, and become something else. Someone who doesn't flinch when the wind cuts your face. Someone who can build a boat out of garbage and dreams. Someone who can carry a year's worth of supplies over a mountain and still smile at the top. You think about the women you've met, the ones who were written off, overlooked, underestimated, and how they've become the fiercest, most unkillable people on the trail. The river keeps moving, so do you. And as you drift past another camp, you spot Annie again. She's standing on the shore, staring into the trees. She nods at you once as you pass. You nod back. You wake up with frost on your eyebrows and your blanket stuck to the side of the tent from sheer condensation. It's morning, technically, though the sky looks like it hasn't made up its mind. Pale grey with a hint of not today, as if the sun took one look at the Klondike and decided to sleep in. You peel yourself out of your cocoon of damp wool, step into your frozen boots, and immediately regret every decision that led you here. Today's task: move the remaining gear. Again, still. You and Maggie break camp in silence. Words feel like unnecessary luxury lately, and besides, you both know what's ahead. The next stretch of river is nearly impassable by boat, shallow, narrow, iced at the edges and full of jagged stones that wait like toothpicks in a trap, which means back to hauling. But this time, you're doing it along the riverbanks, through snowbanks, icy brush, and the kind of terrain that mocks your every step. There's no choice. You need to portage. Again. For the uninitiated, portage is a fancy French word that means carry your boat and everything you own on your back like a doomed pack mule while screaming inside. Welcome to Klondike life. Maggie volunteers to scout ahead while you start loading up. You strap sacks of flour, tools, blankets, and your sad excuse for cookware onto your back. Then you sling the boat's oars across your shoulders like you're some kind of tragic Yukon-themed scarecrow. The trail along the bank is more of a suggestion than an actual path. Roots, rocks, and snowdrifts trip you every third step. Your boots squelch through ice-covered mud, your fingers go stiff gripping the ropes, and your back starts screaming around hour two. But what really breaks you is the sled dogs. You see them abandoned along the trail, ribs poking out from fur, eyes sunken. Some are tied to trees and left. Others wander, still loyal to masters who either froze, fled, or forgot. One follows you for miles, limping, tongue lolling out, its breath forming little clouds in the air. You toss it the last of your jerky. It eats slowly, watching you with eyes that know too much. It's not just dogs being used as pack animals. You've seen everything from goats to donkeys to humans literally dragging sleds with ropes tied across their shoulders. You pass a man with raw rope burns across his collarbones. He's shirtless, covered in soot and snow, dragging a load of supplies like an ox. When you ask if he needs help, he mutters something about proving his worth. You nod and move on. You know that tone. You've heard it in your own head. There's a guy called Red, a wiry, sunburned sourdough who once made his living renting out dogs to greenhorns for high prices. You hear his story at a campfire that night. Apparently, he sold his best team to a well-dressed lawyer from Chicago who couldn't tell a sled harness from his own suspenders. The lawyer drove the team into a frozen creek, nearly drowned them, then blamed the dogs. Red tracked him down, stole the dogs back, and left the lawyer tied to a tree with a note pinned to his chest. Pay better or paddle home. Red is now something of a legend. You meet a trapper named Jules who tells you how he trains wolves to run freight through the Yukon. You laugh at first, thinking it's another tall tale, but later that night you hear howling. Not the usual wild, hungry kind, but sharp and patterned like commands. You look at Maggie. She looks at you. Neither of you says a word. Meanwhile, you're becoming a pack animal yourself. There's no elegance to it, no grace, just the dull, endless repetition of load, walk, rest, repeat. Your shoulders ache so constantly that pain becomes background noise. Your knees wobble like overcooked noodles. Sometimes you forget what day it is. Sometimes you forget your own name until Maggie shouts it when you almost walk off a cliff. The riverbanks aren't kind either. You hit stretches where the snow is so deep you're sinking to your hips. Other places, it's frozen just enough to tease you, then collapse with a sickening crunch that drops you into slush so cold it feels like being stabbed by 1,000 tiny icicles. Your gloves are useless now, crusted in ice, fingers curling into claws from the cold, and yet you move forward. Because stopping means freezing. Stopping means becoming another pile of gear someone finds in the spring. It's not all misery though. Every once in a while the landscape gives you something beautiful. A quiet, mirror-smooth bend in the river where the trees are crusted with frost and the world feels suspended in time. A stretch of moonlight that paints the snow gold, so soft you forget your lungs are burning, or a herd of caribou in the distance moving across the ridge like ghosts. Those moments don't last, but they're just long enough to remind you that life still exists beyond the ache. Then there's the weird stuff. You find a boot nailed to a tree with a note inside. Follow the boot trail for pie. You follow 3 more nailed boots. No pie. Just a collapsed tent with a note. Pie was a lie. Sorry, Maggie laughs so hard she nearly drops her pack. You also meet a guy who claims his sled dog can talk. Says the dog told him where to stake his claim. Maggie asks if the dog also told him where to buy whiskey. The man doesn't blink. Yes, he says, but she prefers gin. By the end of the week, you've gone from hauling packs to hauling the boat itself, dragging it on a homemade sled you fashioned from logs and stripped bark. It looks like a garbage raft, but it works. Sort of. Every now and then it flips, dumps your gear into the snow, and you curse the heavens. But you keep going, because Dawson is ahead, and with each painful mile you're closer. At camp one night, as you rub a raw spot on your shoulder, and Maggie sews another patch into your pants using thread that's definitely dental floss. You both admit what you've been thinking. This isn't about gold anymore. Hasn't been for weeks. It's about finishing, proving you can, proving you will. You look down at your hands, cracked, calloused. bleeding in spots. These hands couldn't hold a pen when you started. Now they could probably bend steel out of spite. Maggie says you're starting to look like a real sourdough. You tell her she smells like a barn fire. She says thanks. The trail still wants to break you. It will try again tomorrow. But for now you fall asleep beside the boat you dragged by hand, curled into a blanket that smells like bacon and regret, dreaming of nothing but silence. The next morning you find something in the snow. Not gear, not a body, but a jawbone, human. Still mostly intact, yellowed teeth set in ice like a grinning fossil. Maggie stares at it for a long second, then nudges it with her boot. Well, she mutters, somebody had a rough night. You want to laugh, you really do, but it catches in your throat because the teeth look too familiar, too present, not ancient, not weathered, just recently separated from a face. You leave it there. It doesn't feel like yours to move. Later that day, while pulling the probably not around another frozen bend in the river, you find more bones. These are farther off trail, tucked under a pine tree. A small pile, ribs, a vertebra, something that might have once been a boot filled with toes. And sitting neatly atop the pile is a rusty gold pan. There are stories. Of course there are. This trail runs on stories, half-lies, and fever dreams. But one of the more persistent tales you've heard comes back to you in a cold wave. People stealing dental gold from the dead. Not out of malice, just pragmatism. You've met men who pan all day and find nothing but sand, then stumble across a corpse with fillings worth $20. That's real money, enough to buy food, or bullets, or a ride back home. No one talks about it in public, but the phrase floats around campfires like smoke. Tooth panning. You remember that jaw you saw this morning? Maybe it didn't fall out on its own. There's a chilling practicality to the way death works out here. It's not sacred. It's not tragic. It's just there. The bodies don't get proper burials unless someone's got time, and nobody's got time. So the snow becomes the coffin, the river becomes the grave, and what's left becomes fair game. You and Maggie don't talk about it, but you both start sleeping with your packs closer, your knives nearer to hand. Not just for protection, but because the rules have shifted. If your body ends up frozen in the trees, someone might unzip your tent, check your teeth, and move on without blinking. Somewhere along the river, you hear about a man named Olson. He froze to death in his tent after a night of drinking bad homemade rum. When they found him, he was smiling, glass-eyed, blue-lipped, holding a bottle of snake oil in one hand. His gear was untouched, but all 4 of his gold-capped teeth were gone, cleanly removed. Rumour says his jawbone was tucked back inside his coat, like a polite gesture from whoever helped themselves. You ask around to see if anyone knew him. One sourdough just shrugs and says he'd have done the same. There's something so casual about it, it makes you shiver. You stop seeing the trail as a path and start seeing it as a kind of mobile graveyard. Frozen reminders line your journey, boots with bones in them, packs rotting under fallen trees, hats sitting eerily upright beside the river like their owners might still be wearing them, only there's no face underneath, and always the teeth. People keep their heads down when they walk past a body, but their eyes dart toward the mouth. It's the quiet horror of it that gets you. No one brags about it. No one jokes. It's not some cruel Wild West looting fantasy. It's the simple, brutal arithmetic of survival. There's gold in the ground. There's gold in people's mouths. The trail doesn't care where it comes from. Then, one fog-heavy morning, you meet a man who makes your stomach twist the wrong way. You're filling canteens at a stream when he appears. Tall, pale, with fingers like spider legs, and a face too calm for someone covered in frost. He smiles. A big, toothy grin. Too toothy. The kind of smile where you count molars that shouldn't be visible. He tells you he's heading to Dawson just like you. Says his name's Cole. Doesn't offer a handshake, just a nod and a question. You seen any bodies lately? You and Maggie share a glance. Cole clarifies. He's looking for a friend who went missing. Disappeared somewhere between here and 40 Mile. He keeps it vague. Too vague. Then he starts asking about trail forks, river curves, places someone might go off alone. He thanks you, smiles again, and disappears into the trees. You both decide to sleep in shifts for a few days after that. By now, you've reached the part of the trail where nothing surprises you anymore. You've eaten pine needle soup, patched your tent with fish guts, and talked to at least 3 people who may or may not be ghosts. You've come to accept that some people will do anything to survive, The trail takes good men and makes them thieves. It takes hopeful women and turns them into scavengers. It takes you, in all your naive ambition, and reminds you that out here, there's no such thing as honour without a full belly. Maggie has a story too. She tells it one night while the fire is low and the sky is full of stars that look fake, like stage props in a bad theatre show. She says she once found a young man dead in the snow, face down in his own vomit, barely 20. His boots were nearly new. She was wearing rags. Her own shoes were falling apart, toes peeking out like they were trying to escape. So she took his boots, and his gloves, and his pocket knife, left the rest, buried him with a rock on his chest. She stares into the flames and says, "If he'd found me first, he'd have done the same." You believe her, but it's not all darkness. Sometimes people choose not to scavenge. Sometimes someone finds a body and builds a cross, leaves a tin cup beside it, scratches a name into wood. One night, you see a small campfire burning beside a snow-covered mound, and a woman sitting beside it, reading aloud from a water-damaged novel. You don't interrupt, you just keep walking. But that image stays with you, someone choosing reverence over convenience. That too is part of the trail, and the days stretch on. The snow comes and goes, your boat leaks, your knees crack, you keep moving, always moving. There are fewer people now. The rush has thinned. Either they've gotten ahead of you, or they're buried behind you. One day you pass a set of boot prints leading off the trail into the woods. You follow them, just for a minute, just to see. At the end of the path you find a collapsed tent, a broken stove, and a wooden crate filled with tools. No body, but there's a gold pan resting near the fire pit, blackened from use. And on top of it, 3 human teeth. You leave them there, you walk back to the river, back to the probably not, and you keep paddling. There are moments on this trail where you seriously begin to doubt that the human body is meant to survive outside of civilization for longer than, say, 4 days. By now, you've been out here long enough to forget the texture of warm bread, the smell of clean clothes, or the sacred sound of a toilet flushing. And speaking of toilets, tonight's story is one they don't put in the adventure books. The one about how, somewhere along this glorious frostbitten expedition, everything inside you decides to mutiny. It starts innocently enough. You wake up with a bit of stomach tightness. You assume it's the usual, sleeping on cold ground, eating lard and beans for weeks, drinking water that, if we're being honest, probably passed through a moose at some point. But by midday the cramps are deeper, and the trail starts feeling longer. There's no time to stop though, because the river isn't going to slow down for your intestines to negotiate terms. By sunset you're sweating through your coat, and Maggie's giving you the kind of side-eye usually reserved for contagious people and travelling salesmen. "You look like death dressed in oilskin," she says. You mumble something in response, probably a Latin prayer or just your own name, and then, not 5 minutes later, it hits. Dysentery. The official, undisputed, undefeated champion of the Klondike Trail. They warned you back in Dyer. Everyone said to boil your water, wash your hands, and never ever trust stew that smells like socks. But the trail is long. You get lazy. You get tired. And one day, you let your guard down with a cold stream and a suspicious hunk of dried meat. That's all it takes. Your next 72 hours are a blur of pain, panic, and absolutely no dignity. There are no outhouses out here. No privacy. The snow is your bathroom, your grave, and your only friend. Every bush becomes a potential emergency site. Maggie, bless her, tries to keep you hydrated, pouring hot water laced with pine needles into your canteen and muttering, "You're not dying of poop in front of me, not today." You thank her with a series of weak grunts. By the second night, you're hallucinating. You dream you're back home, sitting at a table with your mother, eating roast duck and fresh peaches. Then the duck quacks and explodes into firewood. You wake up face down in snow, shivering, with your pants halfway down and a trail of regret leading into the bushes. A squirrel is watching, judging. Maggie tells you about a guy she met who died because he confused a stick of lard for a candle and ate it. Another woman she knew tried to treat her dysentery with whiskey and ended up in a coma that lasted 3 days. By the time she woke up, her tent had collapsed and someone had stolen her shoes. Trail karma, Maggie calls it. You don't respond. You're too busy trying not to die on your own boots. Of course, you're not alone in this. Sickness is as much a part of the trail as snow and lies. It's not just dysentery. There's mountain gut, a lovely condition that turns your insides into soup. Tent fever, which is what happens when people go stir-crazy after being snowed in for too long. And Klondike foot, a condition where your toes turn black, shrivel up and fall off like dried figs. You meet a man named Willis who shows you his left foot, only it's more of a suggestion of a foot now. Fell off during a card game, he says. Didn't notice till I stood up. Then there's the horror of trail latrines, or the lack thereof. You stumble into a camp one afternoon with makeshift signs everywhere reading, "Keep left of the tree line." You ignore one of them and immediately regret it. What lies beyond is a field of frozen excrement, a horror show of human waste frozen in mid-thought. It looks like an art installation from the darkest corner of the human mind. Maggie gags. You gag. Even the birds avoid it. Later, you meet a woman named Dorothea who figured out how to dig her own latrine into the snow and cover it with pine boughs. Ingenious. She teaches you how to dig a windbreak trench, angle it downhill and line it with crushed charcoal to reduce the smell. You're nearly in tears from gratitude. Who knew toilets would one day be considered luxury infrastructure? There's also the phenomenon of poop ice. That's not slang. That's literal. When it's cold enough, the latrine areas freeze into solid blocks. You hear stories of people losing tools trying to break through to add new deposits. One guy apparently dropped his knife and tried to retrieve it, only to get his glove frozen to the block. They had to pour coffee on it to free him. He lost the glove, and probably some self-respect. You try to find humour in it. Everyone does. Humour is the only insulation you've got left out here. People swap tales of the worst places they've had to relieve themselves. In a snowstorm behind a sled mid-run, dangling over the edge of a cliff because there were no trees nearby. Maggie tells you about a guy who tried to use frozen socks as toilet paper. He learned quickly that there's a difference between improvisation and idiocy. But beneath the jokes there's something real, something dangerous. Trail sickness doesn't just weaken you, it marks you, makes you vulnerable, slows you down, and when you're slow, you fall behind. When you fall behind, you disappear. You hear about a group who left a sick man in a tent with some water and crackers, promising to return. When they came back 3 days later, the tent was empty. No footprints, just a note carved into the ice. Wrong direction. No one knows what happened, but you survive. Eventually the fever breaks. Your guts stop trying to escape your body. Your appetite returns. Not all at once, but slowly. The first time you eat a real meal again, lukewarm beans on a biscuit, you weep a little. You tell people it was just the wind. By the 5th day, you're upright again, fragile but functional. You feel like someone who's just emerged from the underworld. You vow never to drink unboiled water again, never to eat questionable jerky, never to trust stew that smells like mothballs. Then, 3 days later, you drink straight from a stream because you're tired and you forget and, well, some lessons are circular. That night, while wrapping your blanket around yourself and checking your boots for mould, you tell Maggie, "If I die out here, make sure they don't take my teeth." She smirks, throws a pine cone at your head and says, "Please, yours aren't worth the effort." You laugh. It feels good to laugh again, even if you're still afraid to sneeze. You wake to the sound of snow whispering across the canvas of your tent like dry leaves. The wind has died down, but the cold remains. A heavy, unmoving thing that wraps around your limbs before you even open your eyes. Every movement feels like cracking ice. Your joints resist, your fingers fumble, your breath fogs out in little puffs as you sit up, boots already stiff and crusted with last night's frost. For a brief second, you wonder if this is it. If this is the morning your body finally says nope and gives out. But it doesn't. Because it never does. Not out here. Today you're building your own coffin. Well, not literally, hopefully. You're building a snow shelter, a trail survival special, because when tents blow away and the wind slices through canvas like it's paper and the temperature drops so low that your eyelids freeze together, there's only one place left to hide, the snow itself. This is a lesson passed from sourdough to chichako like an old curse. Dig down, not up. The wind can't stab you underground. You've heard variations of this phrase since the Chilkoot. You thought they were metaphors. They weren't. Today, you learn the art of the quinsy. A snow mound hollowed out just enough for a human body and a bad dream to coexist in relative comfort. Maggie helps. She's done it before, back in the Coast Range. You stomp out a circle of snow first, pack it tight. Then you pile more snow on top, heap after heap, until you've built a lumpy, misshapen dome that looks like a cross between an igloo and an accident. Then, the waiting game. You let it settle, freeze solid, and then, hours later, you carve it out from the inside. There's something deeply surreal about crawling into a structure made of the same substance that's been trying to kill you for weeks. But as you chip away at the packed snow, you start to feel the shift. It's warmer inside, quieter. The wind is just a muffled hiss. The walls glow faintly blue from outside light, and it feels peaceful. Claustrophobic, yes. A little like being buried alive, sure, but peaceful. You lie there in your snow coffin, staring at the little ventilation hole Maggie poked through the top with a stick, and think about all the strange places you've slept since this madness began. Tents pitched in gale-force wind, caves that smelled like animal pee, tree wells, a pile of flour sacks once, because the tent collapsed mid-storm and you were too tired to fix it. This is somehow the most civilized of them all. You fall asleep in the snow hut with your mittens still on and your hat pulled over your eyes. You dream of fireplaces, hot baths, and a pillow that doesn't crunch when you roll over. Of course, not all snow shelters go this smoothly. You wake sometime after midnight to a strange sound, a low crack followed by a slow groaning above your head. Maggie's already sitting up, eyes wide. "Out," she whispers. "Now." You don't question it. You scramble toward the entrance, your breath short, legs kicking, hands scraping ice, as the ceiling of your shelter sags just slightly, then gives. Snow pours in behind you, heavy and indifferent, like a collapsed lung. You make it out. Barely. Maggie drags you the last foot, coughing and swearing and already laughing because, of course, you almost died in a hole you made yourself. You rebuild. Smaller this time, tighter, less ambitious, and lesson learned. And that's the thing out here. Every mistake is its own teacher. Nobody comes out to quiz you, but if you mess up the exam, you fail. Permanently. There's no reset button, no second draft. Just you, the wilderness, and the constant biting realization that your survival depends entirely on how fast you can learn and how long your luck holds out. Some people don't learn fast enough. You find a shelter 3 days later that wasn't so lucky. It's mostly collapsed, the snow inside stained with something darker than shadow. There's a boot sticking out, toes up, frozen stiff. You don't check for a body. You already know. You and Maggie mark it with a stick and a piece of cloth torn from an old bag. Nothing fancy. Just enough to say, someone was here. The weather turns that night. Hard. A full blizzard. You've been through storms before, but this one feels like the land is actively trying to scrape you off its surface. Wind screams through the trees like a banshee. Snow comes sideways. It's not flakes. It's knives. You stay inside your second shelter, curled like a shrimp around your backpack. Maggie plays cards with herself by candlelight. The flame barely survives. You both chew on the last of the hard biscuits, cracking them between your molars like fossils. Outside, the storm rages. "I once knew a guy who built a shelter too deep," Maggie says. "Didn't poke the air hole right. Fell asleep. Never woke up." You nod. Because that's the kind of bedtime story you get out here. You wake up soaked in condensation. Your breath has iced over your coat. The candle's long gone. The storm's still howling, but your body is too numb to care. Somewhere during that day your shovel breaks. Just snaps right in half while you're trying to dig out the exit. You end up using a frying pan to clear snow. It works. Sort of. Later, you meet a group of travellers camped in a half-collapsed snow cave. They're a mix of old prospectors and new dreamers. They've been stuck here for 2 days. One of them has a fire going inside the shelter, dangerous but warm. You join them just for the heat, just for the company. That's when someone brings up the snow tombs. Not legends, not ghosts. Just the harsh reality that sometimes entire groups of travellers dig into a snowbank and never come out. Avalanche, collapse, suffocation. No warning, no chance. In spring, search parties find the remains, curled around each other, frozen mid-conversation, packs still full. One story talks about a couple found embracing, faces preserved perfectly by the cold. They called it the sleeping lovers. You try not to think about that as you lie awake in your third shelter, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much weight it can take. There's an ongoing debate among survivors, an unspoken one, about what's worse, freezing or suffocating. Some say freezing is peaceful, numbness, then sleep. Others argue that being buried alive in snow is the real nightmare. No air, no movement, just you, shrinking under the weight of white silence. Personally, you'd prefer to avoid both. By the end of the week, the storm passes. The sun returns, weak, pale, but enough to melt a bit of the outer crust. You emerge from your shelter blinking like a cave creature, your breath visible, your clothes stiff with ice. You survived another one. That night you and Maggie sit by the river, fire crackling, eating boiled rice that tastes vaguely like wood smoke and hope. You both look like washed-out ghosts, but you're here, still here, and that counts for something. You pull your blanket tighter, lean back against your pack, and try to imagine what it will feel like to sleep in a real bed again, with walls, and a roof that doesn't collapse. Someday. Maybe. The river's changed. You notice it one morning as you're pulling the probably not away from shore, the mist still heavy, the air sharp with that old metallic smell that always seems to roll off moving water. Something's different. The current feels thicker somehow, slower but more unpredictable. The banks are steeper, the turns tighter, and the quiet, too quiet. Even the birds seem to be holding their breath. Then you see it. A wrecked canoe half submerged in the shallows, gear scattered like confetti in the mud, a boot, a tin cup, a satchel flapping open like a warning sign. But no one around, just the silence, just the cold. You've entered the stretch of a river where people start talking about river pirates. No, not the eye patch and parrot variety. These aren't charming rogues with British accents and flags. These are desperate men, some barely hanging on to their own sanity, who've realised that the easiest way to get rich isn't to find gold, it's to take it from someone else who already did the hard work. They wait in eddies, behind narrow bends, tucked into forested shores like shadows with rifles. They don't announce themselves. They don't fly flags. They just appear, like ghosts with bad intentions and good aim. You first hear the story 2 nights later at a makeshift camp run by an old trapper who introduces himself as Doug. No last name, just Doug. His camp is tidy, his boots are polished, and his beard is so perfectly square it looks like he measures it every morning. Doug talks slow, like he's been chewing each word for a year. Says he saw a crew of 3, good men, get ambushed near Devil's Elbow, a sharp bend about a week north. They had a solid claim, a full load, and were headed to Dawson. Never made it. Doug found the boat later, adrift, blood on the seats, supplies gone, even the boots taken. The gold vanished. Could have been a bear, someone says. Doug shakes his head. Bears don't aim for the strong box. You and Maggie exchange a glance. That night you sleep with your knife under your bedroll. She sharpens hers by firelight, doesn't say a word. After that, every sound in the woods sets you on edge. Every branch crack makes your breath catch. You start glancing over your shoulder mid-paddle. Maggie starts laying traps near the tent. Nothing fancy, just warning lines of cans and bells strung from fishing wire. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. And then it happens. You're camped by the river half asleep when you hear the snap of twigs just beyond the firelight. Not an animal. Too careful. Too slow. Maggie is up instantly, rifle in hand. You grab your knife, heart in your throat. "Who's there?" she calls. Silence, then a voice. "Easy, easy." Just passing through. A man steps into the glow, slim, shivering. No weapon visible, but that means nothing. He's got a pack slung over one shoulder and eyes that move too fast, like he's scanning for something to grab. He asks if he can warm up by the fire. You say yes because saying no feels more dangerous. Maggie doesn't lower the rifle. The man sits, accepts a cup of hot water, doesn't drink it. He says he's from Skagway, heading north. Says he lost his boat. Says he just needs a little food and he'll be on his way. But his boots are dry, and his pack looks too full for a man who lost everything. You keep conversation light. Generic. You don't ask about the rifle that's probably hidden under his coat. He doesn't ask about the gold dust you don't have. It's a game of polite lies. He stays 30 minutes, then disappears into the dark. You sit up the rest of the night, every rustle in the trees sounding like footsteps. At dawn, you check your boat. Everything's still there. But Maggie finds fresh tracks leading away from camp, and another set leading in from the opposite direction. He wasn't alone. That changes things. From then on, you take turns sleeping. One watches while the other dozes, always with a weapon in hand. You stop lighting fires unless absolutely necessary. You start camping off trail, hiding the boat under pine boughs, brushing away footprints. You become prey that knows it's being hunted, even if the predator hasn't shown its face yet. You meet other travellers who weren't so lucky. A man limping downriver with a busted knee and an empty pack. He says 2 men with scarves over their faces boarded his boat at night. beat him with a paddle, and left him tied to a tree. Took everything: gear, food, maps. He's trying to get back to Skagway, on foot. A few days later you come across another wrecked boat. This one's newer, paint still fresh. Inside, a bullet hole through the stern, no blood, no signs of struggle. Just a single boot and a small tin can of gold flakes tucked under a seat, like someone forgot it, or left it on purpose. That night you meet a group of 4 travelling together for protection. They've got a system. 2 row, 2 keep watch. They've rigged a net under the boat to hide supplies and buried a backup rifle in a hollow log near their camp. They offer you food, water, even shelter for the night. But no one sleeps. Not really. By now you've learned that the Klondike has 2 kinds of danger. The ones you see coming, rapids, cold, starvation, and the ones that hide behind smiling faces and polite small talk. And then there's the law, or what passes for it. You start hearing about the Mounties, the Northwest Mounted Police stationed further up the river near Dawson. They're strict, clean and unbribable, or so the stories go. But for now, they're too far away to help. Between here and there, it's just the trail and whoever can hold onto their gear the longest. You do your best to stay off the radar. You move fast, stick to the shallows, avoid narrow bends, no lingering in camps longer than necessary. You start tying bells to your boat, not loud ones, just enough to wake you if someone boards it in the dark. And every time you pass another silent bend in the river, you wonder how many people are hiding behind the trees, watching, waiting. One evening you find a tiny island in the middle of the Yukon, maybe 50 feet across, just big enough for a tent and a fire. You set up camp there, surrounded by water on all sides. It feels safer, like you've carved out your own little kingdom in the middle of a sea of threats. That night the moon is low and orange and the river glows like molten glass. You sit beside Maggie, both of you silent, listening to the water lap against the shore. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asks finally. You nod, not because you believe it, but because you need her to. The fire crackles softly, and somewhere in the dark something watches and waits. You reach the edge of 40 Mile just as the sun sinks behind a mountain that doesn't care you exist. The town, if you can call it that, is more mud than wood, more shouting than structure. Half-buried cabins lean at crooked angles like they're trying to crawl back underground. Smoke rises from chimneys that seem held up by nothing but stubbornness. And at the edge of the main trail, mounted on a pole taller than the tallest tree, is the red serge jacket of the law, flapping like a warning sign. The Mounties have arrived, not many, maybe half a dozen, but they stand out like hawks among pigeons. Crisp uniforms, perfect posture, polished boots somehow, despite the fact that everyone else here looks like they've been dragged behind a sled for 2 weeks. The Royal Northwest Mounted Police aren't here to make friends. They're here to make order, which in the Klondike is about as natural as ice cream in a furnace. You pull into town with Maggie, your boat scraping against the rocky bank. She groans, stretches her arms and mutters, "Let the judging begin." You both smell like wet dog and campfire regret. Your boots are covered in trail mud, your gear is strapped together with fishing line and hope, and your faces have taken on the permanent squint of people who haven't seen comfort in months. In other words, you look exactly like everyone else here. The Mountie closest to the dock greets you with the kind of stiff nod that might have been friendly in another life. He's got a clipboard, and a gun, and a look that says he doesn't believe in laughter. "Names?" he asks. You give them. No fake names. That's a fast way to get on the wrong side of the law out here, and the wrong side is usually the part facing the end of a rifle. He nods again. "Business in Dawson?" You both resist the urge to say survival. Instead, Maggie says, "Travelling, looking to file a claim." He writes it down, says nothing, hands you a small slip of paper. "You'll need this if you plan to pass the next checkpoint, and keep your nose clean." Maggie, never one to let sarcasm go to waste, taps her frostbitten nose. "Doing our best." You walk past the checkpoint into the maze of tents and cabins, and for the first time in a long time, you realize the power of just not being robbed. Because here, unlike the trail, there are rules. The Mounties are slow to act but impossible to bribe. You hear the stories before you even finish your first cup of bitter, burnt coffee from a stand made out of old crates. One man fined for overcharging for socks, another jailed for staking a claim on someone else's land, a third deported back to Seattle for trying to run a poker table without a license. One guy was caught using a corpse to smuggle whiskey, tucked a bottle under the dead man's coat and claimed it was medicinal. They caught him. The corpse got a proper burial. The smuggler got 6 months. It sounds harsh, but after the trail it also sounds fair. You meet a Mountie named Roberts on your second night. He's not tall, not loud, just efficient. You watch him calmly settle a dispute between two prospectors, fighting over a stolen shovel. No shouting, no guns, just a brief investigation and a confiscated shovel. He returns it to its rightful owner and sends the thief packing with a warning and a fine. Not a hanging, not a bullet, a fine. Civilization feels like a strange, distant relative out here, but it exists. Still, the Mounties have their limits. They're outnumbered, underfed, and usually cold. They're not miracle workers. They keep law where they can. Beyond that, it's still the wild. One tells you flat out, if you vanish between here and Dawson, we won't come looking. We can't. Fair enough, but what they do keep is a semblance of justice, and justice on this trail is rare. You start hearing about vigilantes, groups of travellers who, when there's no Mountie around, enforce their own kind of law. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's a mess. You hear about a man hanged for stealing bacon, another who was tied to a tree overnight for cheating at cards. Then there's the guy who rode into camp on a moose. No one knows where he found it. No one knows how he tamed it. But there he was, barefoot, wild-eyed, sitting on a full-grown bull moose like it was a horse. People called him Justice Joe for a week. Then the moose ran off, and so did Joe. No one's seen him since. The town's unofficial rule is this: Mounties handle the paperwork. Everyone else handles the grey areas. You see a man get pickpocketed near the blacksmith. Instead of reporting it, he punches the thief in the throat, grabs his wallet, and walks away. No one interferes. Even the Mounties pretend not to see. But you keep your head down. Maggie does too. You trade quietly, eat quickly, and sleep lightly. Always with a knife within reach. Order is relative here. It exists, but it's hanging by a thread, and everyone knows it. One afternoon, you see Roberts again, this time arresting a man for carrying an unregistered weapon. The man shouts about his rights. Roberts doesn't blink. "You're not in Seattle anymore," he says. "Out here we don't wait for courts. We just try not to bury more bodies than we can count." You start to understand that the law in the Klondike is less about justice and more about control. Just enough structure to keep the whole thing from descending into chaos. And honestly, that's enough. You meet other travellers who love the Mounties, especially the women. They say it's the first time they've felt safe since leaving home. One woman tells you how a Mountie intervened when a drunk prospector cornered her in a saloon tent. Didn't just stop it, arrested him on the spot, no questions. The man was put to work shoveling snow outside the detainment cabin for a week. Still, others grumble. Say the law's too tight. Say it's ruining the freedom of the trail. You know the type. Men who think rules are for other people. They're the loudest in the saloon, the first to cheat at cards and the last to help when someone's boat sinks. You and Maggie keep moving. You spend 2 nights in 40 Mile, trade for supplies, patch the boat, rest your bones. Then you head back to the river. Roberts passes you on the way out. He nods once. "Stay out of trouble," Maggie smiles. "Not likely." And just like that, you're off again. Back into the wilderness, where the law doesn't ride a moose, and no one's watching anymore. Your supplies are running low again, and this time it's not just the usual panic over bacon and tea, it's the medicine. What little you had is gone, doled out to travellers along the way who looked worse off than you. Maggie gave her last bandage to a woman whose fingers were split so deep from frostbite they no longer bent. You traded the final 2 aspirin for a sack of rice that turned out to be mostly gravel and mouse droppings. And now, as you float through another lonely stretch of river wrapped in fog and fatigue, you can feel it creeping in, the real kind of fever. Not gold fever. The burning, body-aching, eye-swelling kind that doesn't just make you think you're going to die, but actually starts the paperwork. At first, it's just dizziness, a kind of weird sway you blame on the river. But the river's calm. Then come the chills, even with 3 layers on. Maggie notices it before you do, watching as you try to make camp and nearly fall into the fire. She doesn't say anything at first, just brings you water, packs your bed tighter, hands you a scarf you swear was already hers. "Don't say it," you mumble through chattering teeth. "I wasn't gonna," she says, voice low. "But just so you know, if you die on me, I'm taking the boat." You almost laugh. Almost. The next day, the fever spikes. It's the kind of sick where even thinking hurts. Your skin is too tight. Your bones feel like they're humming, and your dreams, when you sleep, are full of snow collapsing on top of you in slow motion. You dream of gold, not in pans, but in people's mouths again. The trail keeps recycling its horrors. Maggie keeps you alive, barely. She feeds you mouthfuls of hot water laced with pine bark and berry roots. She wraps you in every spare blanket and builds windbreaks around the tent using driftwood and ice blocks. At night, you wake to find her reading aloud, sometimes from her battered journal, sometimes from a newspaper so old it's yellowed stiff, sometimes from nothing at all. One night you hear her say, "You ever think about how gold looks like sunlight trapped in rock?" You groan something that might be a yes, and she says, "Yeah, pretty little lie, isn't it?" When the fever breaks, it does so suddenly. You wake up in a pool of sweat soaked through every layer, your body shaking but your head clear for the first time in what feels like years. You see Maggie asleep sitting up, one hand still on her knife, like even your body betraying you wasn't enough to make her let her guard down. She wakes with a snort, squints at you and mutters, "You look like death's afterbirth." You try to smile. It hurts. "I'm back," she nods. Barely. The road to recovery is slow. Your legs don't work right for a few days. Your hands shake when you try to hold a cup. You're not weak exactly, but you feel like someone else's body has been loaned to you, someone clumsy, someone hollowed out. And while you were too sick to see it, the weather changed. The snow is lighter now. The trees are greener. There are birds again. Actual birds. Singing. Loud and bold, like they're taunting the misery still caked into your boots. Spring is here, technically, but the fever, yours and everyone else's, still lingers. You see it in the eyes of the people you pass. They're twitchier now, hungrier. Not for food, but for something. The closer you get to Dawson, the more feverish they become. Not sick with infection, but with obsession. Gold fever. It's not a joke anymore. It's not a catchy phrase in headlines. It's real. You can see it in the way men scan the banks, eyes darting from rock to rock. You see it in the way women dig their fingers into the mud, panning for invisible dust with raw nails and trembling hands. There's a man you pass who doesn't even greet you, just points to a hill and says, "They found colour up there." You glance. There's nothing, not even a path. But he runs off toward it like someone told him God lives up there in a gold-plated shack. You stop in a camp where a woman offers to trade you a pouch of premium flakes for Maggie's rifle. You look at the flakes, sparkly, yellow, too light. "Brass shavings," Maggie says flatly. The woman just shrugs. Could have been gold once. The fever doesn't just affect the desperate, it hits the smart ones too. You meet a former school teacher from Chicago, once articulate and thoughtful, now muttering to himself as he stacks stones in perfect rows along the riverbank. He calls them gold magnets, says they align the energy of the river. He hasn't eaten in 3 days. Later, a man offers to pay you to bless his gear. "Just a touch," he says. "Says you look lucky." Maggie stares at him for a long moment and says, "You know what lucky looks like out here?" Breathing. He doesn't blink, just keeps holding out his battered hat like a bowl. You want to believe it's just stress, just the pressure, but deep down you wonder if it's something else. Something in the air, in the rocks, in the river, like the land itself infects people with want. Not hunger, not need. Want the kind that drills into your brain and whispers, "Just a little more, just a little further, almost there." Even Maggie, who's usually immune to this kind of madness, starts acting off. She digs harder, pans more often, stares too long at flecks of dirt. You find her up before sunrise, running her fingers through the shoreline like she's trying to read the future. "You good?" you ask. She doesn't answer, just keeps sifting. That night you finally ask what she'd do if she struck it rich. "Buy a ranch," she says without looking up. "South, somewhere warm." You nod. "Horses?" She grins. "Goats, less attitude." The fever starts to wear off a bit as the river widens again, but it never fully leaves. You realise that everyone has it now. Not the fever of sickness, but the ache of almost rich, almost there, almost someone new. It gets under your skin. In a small village near the confluence of 2 rivers, you hear about a man who ate his boot leather after losing all his food in a capsized canoe. Another drank lamp oil and called it spirit fire. Someone else built a fake gold claim just to lure people in, then robbed them blind with a slingshot and a knife carved from bone. You ask a local if anyone ever finds peace out here. She laughs. Only when they stop looking. By the end of the week, you can stand without shaking, paddle without fainting, think without hearing buzzing in your ears. The fever is gone, your strength is back. But your dream, you're not so sure anymore. The sign says, "Welcome to Skagway," but it might as well read, "Abandon hope, ye who enter here," scrawled in whiskey and broken teeth. You'd passed through once, back at the very beginning, just long enough to be overcharged for a mouldy biscuit and screamed at by a man selling pickaxes shaped like fish. But now you're back, just briefly, because Maggie's rifle misfired and you need parts. And if you're going to find anything resembling a gunsmith, it's here, in the most lawless slice of civilization north of anything resembling good judgment. Skagway's a different beast than the rest of the trail. This isn't tent cities or muddy outposts barely clinging to the idea of order. This is a full-blown boomtown stitched together with greed, sweat, and half a dozen shady building permits. The streets are packed with people who didn't even bother to try the trail. Bankers, barkeeps, gamblers, professional opportunists, gold rush parasites, the whole lot of them. You blend in just fine, and at the centre of it all is the man they call Soapy Smith. You've heard the name whispered like a joke told too close to a grave. Every saloon, every checkpoint, every riverside fire ring carries some story of this guy. Part conman, part mayor, part myth. Supposedly he runs Skagway like his own personal casino, one where the house always wins and the house is just Soapy in a fancy hat. You're not even off the dock before someone tries to rob you blind. A boy no older than 12 offers to carry your bag, nearly bolts with it before Maggie trips him, and calmly relieves him of a small dagger he clearly wasn't supposed to have. "You really gonna stab people with this?" she asks him, inspecting the blade like it's a spoon. "I wasn't gonna stab you," the kid says with a grin. "That's Skagway for you. Everything's for sale. Loyalty, morality, possibly time itself. Soapy Smith's operation is everywhere without ever being obvious. You start noticing the patterns. The same soap seller on every corner, running the same con. He wraps bars of soap in paper, claiming some have money hidden inside. $20 bills, 50 if you're lucky. People line up to buy them. Some win, most don't. You ask a man how it works. "Oh, I won $30 last week," he says, eyes wide. "Easy money." You watch him buy 6 more bars. He wins nothing. You later find out the winners are Soapy's men, planted to build the illusion. He salts the crowd with shills, feeds the con with noise and fake luck. It's an old trick, older than Alaska. But it works like a charm here. People want to believe. That's the real currency out here. Not gold, not flour. Belief. And Soapy sells it wholesale. Skagway's full of cons like this. Fake lotteries, rigged card games, shell games with coins that vanish and never come back. You sit in a saloon and watch a man lose his boots, his coat, and a claim deed in the span of 20 minutes. He barely blinks, just downs another drink and mutters, "Wasn't a great claim anyway." You'd pity him if you weren't pretty sure the claim was real and worth $5,000. But Soapy's power doesn't stop at scams. He's got a telegraph office where people pay to send messages back home. Only the wires go nowhere. Literally. They're nailed into the walls and cut off at the roof. One guy says he paid to send news of his strike to his mother in Kansas. That was 4 months ago. No reply. You show him the back of the building. The wires hanging like loose shoelaces in the wind. He doesn't say anything, just stares. The real kicker is that Soapy likes being visible. He walks through town like a king. Fancy coat, bowler hat, a cane that probably hides a blade. He tips his hat to women, gives candy to kids, pays for funerals when people die without families, which is often. The town treats him like a necessary evil, a devil they know. You see him once, briefly. He's talking to a group of miners outside a general store, laughing like an old friend. They lean in close, hanging on every word. Maggie watches him with the wariness of a wolf spotting another predator. "That's him," she mutters, "the man who sold Dawson twice." You ask her what she means, she smirks. "He sold Dawson City to a group of greenhorns who didn't realize it was already settled. Drew a fake map, claimed he owned the whole place. They paid him, followed the directions, and ended up in the woods south of nowhere." You pause. "And what happened?" She shrugs. "They're probably still looking." You stay in Skagway for 2 nights, long enough to get the rifle part, eat something that vaguely resembles chicken, and observe the spectacle. On your second day, you see a man dragged out of a bar by Soapy's crew. They rough him up just enough to send a message. Don't cheat the cheaters. The man limps away, says nothing. He's lucky. But you also hear whispers of resistance, a group called the Committee of 101, locals and lawmen tired of Soapy's chokehold on the town. They want him gone, or dead. It's hard to tell which. One shopkeeper tells you there's going to be a confrontation soon. Won't be pretty, he says, but it'll be right. You nod. You've seen what happens when people get desperate enough to fight back. And then, just like that, you leave Skagway again, back onto the river, back into the quiet. The moment your boat slides into the current, the town disappears behind you like a bad dream. But the lesson sticks. Out here, justice doesn't come on horseback. It comes with loaded dice, fake deeds, and a smile that costs more than it's worth. Maggie reloads her rifle, says nothing, and somewhere behind you, in that crooked town built on quick lies and crooked deals, Soapy Smith laughs and counts his winnings. For now, you're on the river again, of course. Where else would you be? The banks are lined with frost-kissed pine, the sky's a thick grey wool pressing down, and the current is still pulling you toward whatever's left of Dawson. But tonight, after weeks of mud, murder, moose, and maybe gold, something strange starts whispering its way through the camps, through the trailside conversations and trader gossip. Romance. You nearly choke on your coffee the first time you hear the phrase Klondike wedding. Maggie rolls her eyes so hard you worry she'll throw a vertebra, but sure enough, it's a thing. People are getting married out here, on purpose, and not just shotgun weddings where a man with a rifle and a trembling hand officiates. Real ceremonies, dresses, rings, vows, even cakes when someone's rich enough to afford flour that doesn't smell like mildew and regret. At first, you think it's just another trail rumour, like the violin-playing bear or the dog that predicts gold strikes. But then you see it, a wedding procession, right there along the river, just outside a fishing camp. The bride is wearing what used to be a curtain. The groom's suit jacket has only one sleeve. The officiant is a bearded man with a cracked Bible, a missing toe, and a talent for harmonica. You and Maggie watch from a distance, chewing jerky and trying to decide if this is sweet or horrifying. The couple says their vows. People clap. Someone throws dried peas. The whole thing lasts 20 minutes, and is immediately followed by a brawl over who gets the last of the wedding whiskey. But here's the thing, they look happy, and that's a rare currency out here. You start noticing more of them. Couples who met on the trail, bonded over misery and mouldy bacon, and decided that if they could survive 3 snowstorms and a tent fire together, maybe marriage wouldn't be so bad. You meet Eliza and June, a pair of women who teamed up back in Skagway and never split up. They share a sled dog team, a tent, a claim, and a sarcastic streak so sharp it could skin a moose. They got married in a brothel-turned-chapel using rings made from melted-down spoons. Their wedding cake was a stack of bannock drizzled with pine syrup. "We know it's crazy," Eliza says, sipping from a chipped mug. "But everything out here is crazy. Might as well do it with someone who doesn't snore." Then there's Dwight and Maud. He's a soft-spoken accountant from Pittsburgh with a nose that constantly leaks. She's a trapper's daughter with 2 rifles, 1 eye, and a laugh that sounds like thunder. They met during a sled crash. She saved him from freezing. He proposed the next morning, says he figured it was downhill from there anyway. You and Maggie start playing a game. Spot the trail couples. It's usually easy. Shared flasks, 1 bedroll. The quiet, efficient teamwork of people who figured out how to carry 100 pounds of flour and still argue about soup without breaking up. Some couples move like they've been married for years, others like they just agreed not to kill each other today. Of course, not all trail romances are warm and fuzzy. You see a woman chasing a man down the shoreline with a skillet, yelling something about lies and stolen maps. Another couple spends a full hour shouting in front of a campfire over whether beans should be soaked overnight or eaten like God intended, in pain. That one ends with a thrown boot and a broken panhandle. But the weirdest part is, for every fight there's a new proposal. You meet a Mountie who moonlights as a wedding officiant, says he's married over 60 couples since the rush started. Some stick, some don't. One pair filed for annulment before I even finished the paperwork, he says. Claimed irreconcilable differences over stew thickness. You ask him what the secret is, why people are doing this out here, in the mud and blood and snow. He shrugs. Same reason they're looking for gold. Hope. Maggie snorts. Hope gets people killed. The Mountie grins. So does whiskey. But here we are. Of course, some people are coming out here just to get married. Not for love, for business. You start hearing about mail-order brides, women paid, promised, or persuaded to travel north and marry men who've already staked their claims and now need someone to keep them company, cook, and, let's be honest, keep them sane. Some arrive wide-eyed, full of dreams and floral-scented letters from men who own half of Dawson. Others arrive and immediately run screaming back to the boat. One woman tells you she was promised a log mansion. Turns out it was one wall, a tarp, and a bucket. She left him the next morning. The bucket she kept. Then there are the marriages that come with contracts. You overhear one being negotiated over stew, 10% of any gold struck, 2 mules, and access to a shared tent. Romantic. You and Maggie joke about marrying for convenience. Shared cooking, shared guard duty, someone to argue with over who gets the dry socks. Would you say yes? You ask her one night. She smirks. You? Never. You'd cry during the vows. You grin, only if you wrote them. There's something about all of it that shouldn't make sense, but somehow does. Maybe it's the isolation. Maybe it's the shared trauma. Maybe it's just easier to face the madness with someone beside you. Even you start to feel it, that flicker of longing, not just for love, but for something that makes the trail mean something. If you're going to risk your life for a shot at gold, it helps to have someone to share the story with, or someone to bury you properly. One night, at a larger camp, you stumble into an actual dance. A local with a fiddle plays too fast, and half the dancers are off rhythm, but no one cares. There's whiskey and laughter, and a woman in a wedding dress made from tent canvas and lace stolen off a brothel curtain. Her husband's wearing boots 2 sizes too big, and a ring carved from caribou antler. They dance like they have nothing left to lose. You and Maggie join them. You don't know the steps, you don't know the song. But for the first time in weeks, you forget that your boots are wet and your socks have holes, and you've been living off beans and regret for a month. You just move, and laugh, and let the gold wait for once. The gold's closer now, you can feel it. Not because you've seen any, mind you, but because everyone around you is acting even more completely, unmistakably unhinged than usual. And that's saying something for a place where a man once tried to trade his boots for a jar of pickles and a piece of string. The air is different too. Thinner, hungrier. You're floating down a stretch of river that should be beautiful. Crystal clear water, birds overhead, mountains in the distance. But no one's looking at the view anymore. They're staring at the ground, the gravel, the shimmer of mica that looks almost like gold if you squint and have a good imagination and no shame. Maggie's been quieter lately. Not her usual sarcastic quiet, dangerous quiet. The kind where you can hear her mind working too hard. She pans now every time you stop, even if it's just for a break to stretch your legs. She says she's just checking, but you know better. The real gold rush didn't start in the rivers. It started in people's heads. It's not about striking it rich anymore. It's about not being the one who doesn't. The dream of Dawson is more than a destination now. It's a fever dream everyone's convinced they're about to wake up into. Rich, famous, important. Even you feel it some nights. That whisper, that what if. What if your claim is the one that changes everything? What if the trail, the blood, the hunger, the blisters, they weren't a mistake, but a sacrifice? You pass a man digging a trench with his hands, no pan, no shovel, just cracked bleeding fingers and a wide-eyed stare. You ask what he's found. He doesn't answer, just digs faster. You pass another camp where a man's standing on a rock shouting. He's holding a gold nugget the size of a walnut and yelling to no one in particular. I knew it! I knew it! Who's laughing now, huh? No one's laughing. No one even looks up. They're too busy digging their own holes. Not long after, you hear someone mutter, probably pyrite, fool's gold. It's everywhere now, this glittering little prank the earth plays on people desperate to believe. And it works. It always works. You can't help it. You pick up a piece, hold it in the light, turn it over. It sparkles. You know it's worthless. But still, what if? Maggie's been carrying a small pouch of flakes she won't talk about. You've seen it. She tucks it deep in her pack, checks it constantly. You haven't asked about it because you're afraid of the answer. And you're not immune either. You're starting to dream about it. You picture yourself back home with gold stitched into your coat lining, ordering tea and steak with a smirk. The fantasy plays like a broken record in your mind. A reward. A purpose. One night you pull into a camp that doesn't look like much. Just a cluster of tents and a collapsed lean-to. But the people there are different. They've struck something. You can see it in the way they guard their fires, their packs, their shovels. They don't talk, they glare. One of them has a shotgun laid across his lap while he eats. Another sleeps with one eye open, hand curled around a pickaxe like it's a baby. No one tells you what they found, but you hear the scraping at night, metal on rock, constant, desperate, like they're afraid the gold will slip away if they sleep. In the morning you're gone before dawn. After that you stop trusting anyone with clean boots. No one has clean boots this far in unless they've been standing still on purpose, guarding something. You start hearing whispers of the richest strike yet, Bonanza Creek. People say it's just outside Dawson, that someone hit a vein so rich you can dig with a spoon and retire by sunset, that people are pulling $500 of gold per pan. You'd think that would bring celebration. Instead, it brings chaos. People start abandoning camps, burning their own tents behind them just to get a head start. You see men paddling like devils downstream, gear flying out behind them, shouting the names of creeks like war cries, Bonanza, El Dorado, Rabbit Creek, I swear it's real. Someone offers you a map for $10. It's hand-drawn, barely legible, and possibly upside down. You buy it anyway. Maggie starts doing the math aloud at night. If it's $500 a pan, and we do 20 pans a day, you don't stop her, but the numbers get more frantic every night. Eventually you arrive at the outskirts of what passes for Dawson. You expected gold-covered streets and triumphant brass bands. What you get is mud. So much mud. And tents. Hundreds of them. Sprawled across hillsides, jammed between trees rising out of the earth like weeds. Smoke everywhere. Yelling. Laughter. Gunshots in the distance that no one reacts to. The rivers choked with canoes, rafts, boats made from barrels. It looks less like a city and more like a refugee camp where everyone's slightly too enthusiastic. And there, just at the edge of town, is Bonanza Creek. You think it would be marked by a sign, or a gate, or maybe a warning. But no, it's just there. A shallow ribbon of water, barely wider than a cart path, already half choked by people. Men and women and children, elbow deep in mud, swinging pans like they're performing surgery. No one talks. No one notices you. You step onto the bank and stare at the water. It looks like any other creek. The current is slow, the rocks are dull, the air smells like sweat and ambition. There are wooden flumes set up, sluices nailed together with hope and splinters. People work side by side, but no one shares anymore. That phase is long gone. Maggie doesn't hesitate. She drops her pack, wades into the stream and starts scooping. You follow. Your hands are raw within the hour, your knees hurt, your back screams, but still you scoop, pan, shake, sift, wait. The first flake appears in your pan like it's been summoned. Tiny, bright, irrefutable. Gold. You both freeze. Maggie leans over, neither of you speaks. And that's when it hits you. This is how it begins. This is how people lose their names, their sleep, their lives. This little shimmer in the mud is all it takes. Just enough to whisper, what if there's more? You don't even feel the cold anymore, or the pain, or the hunger. Just the weight of that one flake. Heavier than it should be. Heavier than anything you've carried so far. You lose track of time. You lose track of everything, actually. Once you start panning, the days stop being days and just become one long blur of water, gravel and aching joints. You wake in the dark, you work in the cold, you eat when you remember to, which isn't often, and sleep only when your fingers no longer obey commands. There's no rhythm to it, just obsession. No destination anymore, no milestones. Just one question looping endlessly in your skull. Is this the pan that changes everything? Bonanza Creek is a gold trap in every sense of the word. The gold's real. You see it. You hold it. But it never comes all at once. Not enough to leave, just enough to stay. You and Maggie stake a modest claim. Nothing fancy, just a shallow bend along the South Fork where the current slows down. She calls it the likely scam. You hammer in the posts together, scribble your names onto a battered registration sheet with a pencil that's been sharpened with a knife, and hand it in at a tent labelled Mining Office that smells suspiciously like pipe smoke and beans. The guy behind the desk doesn't even look up, just stamps the paper and grunts. Next. So there it is. You're officially gold miners now. Congratulations. You can almost hear the sarcastic applause. You start building your rocker, what the old-timers call a cradle. It's a clunky wooden contraption that lets you process more dirt faster than panning alone. Maggie takes the lead, of course. You mostly hold things and get yelled at for measuring wrong. The finished product is ugly. but it works. And the moment you dump your first load of creek gravel into it and catch the glint of flakes along the riffles, it feels like alchemy, like you've discovered fire, or God, or at least something that might buy you new socks and a hot bath. But here's the part no one tells you. It's work, not adventure, not treasure hunting, just endless bone-grinding, soul-flattening work. Every day is the same. Shovel dirt, wash it, repeat. Your hands become claws, your back starts humming like an angry beehive. Your fingernails go black from bruises you don't even remember getting. Your clothes don't dry. Your boots fill with mud that seems to regenerate like it's alive. And the gold, it trickles in. Not in chunks, not in nuggets the size of your thumb like the storybooks promised. Just flakes, dust. Enough to make you keep going, not enough to stop. Maggie keeps a tin tucked into her coat. Every time you find something, she adds it to the pile. Sometimes she shakes it near her ear like it's a baby rattle full of possibilities. I want to hear it clink, she says. Real clink. Not this whispery fairy dust. You start to hate the sound of gravel, the smell of silt, the feel of wet leather gloves. Even sleep isn't safe. You dream in pans and sluices and shovels. Once you wake up swearing you've lost your best nugget, only to realise you never had one. And around you, it's worse. The creek is a hive now, hundreds of people packed elbow to elbow, each one building their own little claim to madness. Arguments break out hourly, over inches of land, over run-off water, over whose dog stepped where. A man gets stabbed with a broken shovel because his sluice shifted during a flood and spilled someone else's wash pile. The Mounties have a tent out here now, not for prevention, just for after. They keep a record of fights, thefts and bodies. The list gets longer every day. Someone tries to steal your rocker one night. Maggie catches them mid-lift, holding a frying pan like a hammer of justice. The would-be thief stumbles, falls and rolls into the creek. She watches him drift a few feet before growling, "Try it again, and I'll baptize you in mud." You don't ask questions, you reinforce the rocker with extra stakes, but it's not all darkness. Some days you laugh, mostly out of disbelief. One day a man comes running through camp with a chicken. No one knows where he got it. He screams, "I struck poultry," and disappears into the woods. Another morning you find a gold flake shaped exactly like the number 7. You show Maggie. She says it's a sign. You both laugh for 20 minutes. You needed it. Then there's the day you find your first nugget. Real, heavy, thumb-sized, lumpy, ugly, beautiful. You're shoveling like usual, working the south edge of your claim, when your spade strikes something solid. You scoop, squint, expect a root or a stone, and instead, there it is, sitting in the pan like a tiny deformed golden potato. Your breath catches. You shout for Maggie. She comes running, skids to a stop, and stares. "Holy!" You nod, unable to speak. Together you rinse it, weigh it in your palm, feel its impossible weight. 2 ounces at least. You don't jump, you don't scream, you just sit, together, silent, holding the thing that's been at the centre of this entire mess. Later Maggie says, "Still want to call the claim the likely scam?" You nod, especially now. That night you both sit by the fire staring at the nugget. It's not huge, it won't buy you a mansion, but it's real, not a promise, not a rumour, not a what if, real. You talk about what you'll do if more come. She wants land, goats, a hot bath once a week. You say you want a bakery, nothing fancy, just warm bread and no one trying to kill you for a slice. She smirks. You bake? No, but I believe in delegation. You sleep better that night than you have in weeks, but the next morning you wake up and it's already gone. Not the nugget, still tucked in its tin, but the feeling, the moment. Because now you need another one, just one more, and you know where that road goes. Still, you pick up the shovel, you dig, because now you know it's down there. It happens during the night. The creek rises, not a little, not a splash over the boots. A full, frothing, roaring wall of meltwater fed by some distant storm you never saw coming. You wake to the sound of rushing water that's too loud, too close. Maggie's already up, barefoot, yanking supplies out of the tent with one arm and dragging your rocker cradle with the other. "Get up," she shouts over the noise. "We're about to be baptized." You stumble out into chaos. The creek's no longer a polite trickle. It's become a grey-brown beast, swallowing up pans, stakes, and whatever poor souls didn't tie things down. You see a miner's tent collapse like a paper bag. Someone's gear, tent, boots, pots, floats past like offerings to some very unimpressed river god. You and Maggie haul everything up the bank high onto the rocky ridge behind your claim, panting, soaked, and already mourning what's probably been washed away. It all happens in less than 10 minutes. The flood takes your sluice box, your shovel, and about half of your dreams. You find the rocker lodged in a tree the next morning, covered in moss and creek slime, legs broken like a drunk moose tried to dance on it. Maggie retrieves it with the same reverence you might give to a fallen comrade. She pats the top of it and mutters, "You did your best, buddy." You spend the next 3 days cleaning up. Everything is wet. Not damp, wet. The kind of wet that soaks into your bones and makes you feel like a cold sponge pretending to be human. Your food is soggy. Your socks are developing personalities. Your blanket smells like the inside of a drowned beaver. But you're alive, and so is your gold tin. Maggie found it wedged under a tree root, half buried, the lid slightly askew but intact. She opened it, checked its contents, and promptly burst into what you'll politely call emotional swearing. So you do what survivors do. You rebuild. With what exactly? Whatever's left. The new sluice box is made from driftwood and sheer arrogance. Your new shovel is technically a frying pan attached to a broken broomstick. You start calling it the diggin' skillet, and honestly, it works about as well as your last shovel, which says more about the shovel industry than you care to unpack right now. And you're not the only ones. The whole creek looks like a war zone. Tents flattened, flumes collapsed, people stumbling around in mud up to their thighs, eyes blank, searching for gear, dignity, or maybe just a dry pair of socks. One guy swears he saw his trousers float past with a fish in one leg. Another claims the river took his gold pouch and left him a frog in return. But even in disaster, there's gold. The flood churned the creek bed, unearthed new pockets, changed the current. And suddenly, people are finding colour in places that had been dry and dead for weeks. It's as if the river was saying, "Fine, here's your shiny dirt, now quit whining." You and Maggie, ever the opportunist, start working a new edge near a fallen pine. First pan, flakes. Second, more flakes. Third, a flake and a nugget so small you nearly missed it, but still, it counts. Word spreads fast, as it always does. Soon there are strangers encroaching again, sidling up too close to your claim, asking casual questions with greedy eyes. Maggie answers them by planting a new stake labelled "Private Claim, Trespassers Will Be Cursed." You don't ask what she meant by cursed, and neither do they. One night, a stranger lingers near your fire. Says he's from Nome, which is either impressive or completely irrelevant depending on who you ask. He spins a tale about a creek upriver where the water glows with gold and where nuggets the size of eggs lie just beneath the gravel. Maggie raises an eyebrow. You suppress a laugh. After he leaves, she mutters, "If the gold's that easy, why is he sleeping in boots with holes?" But still, the story sticks with you, just like all the others. This place, Dawson, Bonanza, the Klondike itself, it's not just dirt and water, it's story-soaked. Everything smells like desperation and belief. Everyone has a legend. Someone who struck it rich, someone who vanished in the night, someone who hit a vein so pure they could afford hot baths and silk underwear until the day they died in a poker fight over biscuits. You meet a woman who says she once found a nugget shaped exactly like Queen Victoria's face. Another claims to have found a gold tooth in a salmon. A third tells you her uncle sneezed out a flake after mining too long without a mask. And in between these tales, the arguments rage. Is it better to pan or to sluice? Is the real gold further upriver or deep beneath Dawson? Are the Mounties secretly keeping the best claims for themselves? Did the government plant the first gold nugget just to get rid of the unemployed? That last one's Maggie's theory. You're only half sure she's joking. Then there are the weirdos, the fringe gold fanatics who've gone full conspiracy. You meet a man in a raccoon hat who insists the gold speaks to him. Another woman refuses to touch metal tools, claiming they disrupt the gold spirits. One guy's building a mine shaft by himself with nothing but a spoon and a deep, profound belief in karma. You admire the madness. A little. But the real shift comes one morning when Maggie holds up a nugget the size of a marble and says, "We're getting close." Close to what exactly? You're not sure. Not rich. Not free. But something. You can feel it too. Like the trail has led you to the last chapter of whatever this story is. That if you dig just a few more inches, or survive a few more days, You'll finally understand what this whole cursed adventure has been for. You don't say any of this out loud, neither does she. But that night, you cook a real dinner. Beans, flour biscuits, even a slab of smoked fish someone traded you for help fixing their sluice. You eat slow, you watch the creek, and for a moment, just a moment, it feels like you've already made it. You don't hear the shot, not at first. You feel it. The sound rolls through your chest like thunder filtered through gravel. You pause mid-scoop, pan half full of silt, and look up to see Maggie already standing, eyes narrowed toward the ridge above the creek. Another shot cracks the air. This one you hear. Sharp, panicked, followed by shouting. And then the unmistakable sound of a man crying. Trouble. Real trouble. You drop the pan, mud and gold and all, and climb the slope behind your claim, boots slipping on wet roots, lungs burning. At the top you crouch beside Maggie, both of you peering over a thick stand of spruce. Below, 2 men are kneeling beside a collapsed sluice box, shouting at a third who's bleeding heavily from the leg, clutching it like he's trying to hold in water with a sieve. One of the men holds a rifle. The other has his hands in the air, saying something you can't make out, but the tone is all too familiar. "I didn't mean to." Maggie taps your shoulder. "That's Tom." You squint. It is. Tom, the quiet, friendly guy who lent you a tin of coffee a few weeks ago when yours had mould-growing colonies worthy of scientific study. He'd mentioned a partner. Must be one of the men standing, maybe the shooter. A dispute then, a stake line. Maybe someone jumped the claim, or maybe Tom tried to pan the wrong corner and caught lead for his trouble. You stay hidden, because this is how people die now. Not from cold or starvation, but from gold, from inches of dirt and ego. After a long moment, the shooter lowers his rifle. The partner pulls a bandage from his coat and starts wrapping Tom's leg. You exhale. Crisis. Temporarily paused. But the message is clear. It's getting dangerous now. You head back to camp and find everything still where you left it, but suddenly the fire feels colder. The tent feels flimsier, and your back itches with the awareness that someone might be watching from the trees, waiting to claim what's yours if you make one mistake. That night you and Maggie dig a cache pit beneath your tent. You line it with stones, wrap the gold tin in canvas and bury it deep. It won't stop a determined thief, but it might slow them down. Long enough to wake, long enough to fight back. She sharpens her knife that night with silent, methodical strokes. You check your own blade, then your hatchet. Then you both lie in your separate bedrolls, not sleeping. Because now the gold isn't just a dream, it's bait. The next day the camp's different, tighter, less friendly. People keep to themselves. No one shares tools anymore. No one trades coffee or news or weather updates. It's not a community now, it's a battlefield. You hear about a fistfight over a single bucket of gravel, about a man who salted his neighbour's pan with brass filings to make him abandon a rich site, about 2 brothers who staked opposite sides of a tributary and now haven't spoken in weeks, except to shout insults and threats over the water. The gold is doing what hunger, snow and wilderness never could, turning people into wolves. But even among the madness there are whispers of the one, the claim, the motherlode, the streak that's going to change everything. Someone finds it. You know the moment it happens. It's just after sunrise when a scream cuts across the creek. Pure, unfiltered joy. Not fear, not pain, victory. You scramble up the bank again, Maggie on your heels, and from a ridge you see them. 2 prospectors jumping, laughing, holding something high overhead. It glints in the weak morning sun like a lighthouse for the lost. A nugget the size of a child's fist. Soon the camp explodes. Everyone rushes the spot. Men and women and dogs and children, all charging with pans and picks and whatever tools they can grab. No one knows exactly where the nugget came from. Doesn't matter. They just start digging. Dozens of people pounding into the earth like ants at a spilled syrup bottle. By noon, the entire bend is destroyed. Trees uprooted, water rerouted, tents crushed, all in pursuit of one clue, one maybe. You and Maggie stand back and watch the chaos. "Should we jump in?" you ask. She stares, lips tight. "And give up what we've built?" You look down at your hands, covered in dirt, scarred, numb from weeks of hauling mud and moving rocks. You think about your claim, your cache pit, the flakes, the nugget, the small, hard-won pile that already cost you more than most people would ever guess. "No," you say, "let them tear each other apart." And they do. That night, there are 3 fights, 1 broken jaw, a tent set on fire by accident, or maybe not, and someone screams that his gold pouch was stolen. The Mounties arrive the next day and take statements no one believes. They confiscate a rifle, arrest a man for punching a Mountie horse, and declare the entire bank a disputed territory, whatever that means. You go back to your claim, you dig, but everything's different now. The work hasn't changed, but you have. The rush is gone. The hope is still there, buried deep but dulled. You dig because it's what you do now, because it's what the trail turned you into. Sometimes Maggie hums while she works. Old songs, bar tunes, fragments of lullabies. It's comforting. Reminds you there's still a person under all this grime and grit and calloused survival. One evening, after hours of silence, she asks, "What if this is it?" You glance up. What? This creek, this claim, this life. What if we're not almost rich? What if this is as far as it goes? You stare at the pan in your hands, at the silt, the flakes, then at her, and for once, you don't need to answer. Because the truth is, it might be. And that's not failure. That's just how stories end sometimes. Not with treasure or triumph, but with a slow settling into the version of the dream that was possible. You keep digging, not for gold, for something else. Steadiness, shelter, maybe peace. Maybe the real strike was survival all along. The end doesn't come the way you thought it would. There's no grand announcement, no final nugget the size of your fist, no glowing letter from a distant bank saying, "Congratulations, you're rich." Instead, it comes slowly. So slowly you almost miss it. It's in the way your boots don't squelch when you step into camp because you finally reinforce the paths with logs. It's in the way Maggie no longer checks the gold tin obsessively, but instead lines it up next to the fire, letting the warmth dry it like it's just another piece of gear. And it's in the way you wake up one morning and realize you don't feel the need to pan first thing. You've reached a point where the gold, real, honest flakes of it, doesn't mean what it used to. It's still valuable, still heavy in the palm, but now it's more like a paycheck, a trade, a reason to stay alive maybe. Not a fantasy anymore, and definitely not a reason to lose your mind. Maggie calls it hitting bottom in a good way. You sit by the fire one evening, both of you covered in soot and stories, and she says, "You know, I thought we'd be different when this ended." "Richer?" you ask. She snorts. "Taller, less smelly." You both laugh, the kind of quiet laughter that bubbles up when you're too tired to fake anything else. The truth is, you are different, but not in the ways people back home would recognize. The gold hasn't turned you into legends, but it has turned you into survivors. The claim is producing, not spectacularly, but steadily. A few flakes a day, the occasional nugget the size of a pea, enough to feed you, keep your gear in order, trade for warm clothes and soap and the luxury of dry socks. You're not rich, but you're stable, which out here is practically mythical. The camp around you is quieter now. Winter's not quite back, but it's making threats. The days are shorter. The sun doesn't rise so much as peer over the mountains and then retreat, unimpressed. A few tents disappear every day, folks heading south or east or just away. Some leave with heavy pouches and heavier regrets. Others leave with nothing but the clothes they came in wearing, muttering about curses and bad luck and promises broken by rivers. The Mounties, still around, start taking inventory of who's left. They ask if you plan to stay through winter. Maggie says yes before they finish the question. You don't argue. The truth is, the thought of leaving feels wrong. Not yet. Not when you've finally figured it out. How to live out here. How to stay warm. How to stay you. You've already been through the worst. The trail, the river, the hunger, the fever, the pirates, Soapy, the flood, the madness, and still, here you are. One night around a shared campfire someone asks, was it worth it? It's not a new question. People throw it around like a stone they don't want to keep. A man with frostbitten ears says no. A woman with a claim near Rabbit Creek says yes. A third man says, ask me again when I've spent it. But Maggie just looks at you, smirks, and says, still not dead. So that's a start, and you've made friends. Not many, but a few. There's Eliza and June. They're still out here, still digging, still together. They stop by your claim sometimes and trade stories, advice, and the occasional cup of real coffee. You've started to think of them as neighbours, in a weird frontier sense. You've even seen Dwight and Maud again. He lost another tooth. and she's built a windproof outhouse that's the envy of the valley. One afternoon you and Maggie walk up the ridge behind camp to get a view of the land. You look out at the maze of tents, the winding creek, the muddy trails hardened into habit. It's not pretty, but it's yours. She nudges your shoulder. Still want to open that bakery? You think about it. About warm bread and early mornings and the soft glow of ovens. About quiet. About rest. Maybe, you say. But I'd have to learn how to bake. She grins. You dig dirt like a pro. I think you can handle flour. Back at camp, you open the tin and take inventory. The gold glints dully in the fading light. Not enough to retire. Not enough to buy land or a boat or even a good hotel in San Francisco. But enough. Maggie adds one more flake. Just found it this morning. Still growing, she says. And it is. That night you sleep without your knife under your bedroll, the first time in months. The dream is quiet. No snow, no pirates, no creek swallowing your gear. Just the soft, rhythmic scoop of gravel and the sound of Maggie humming off key beside you. In the morning you wake up to frost on the tent flaps and a pot of boiling water already on the fire. She looks at you and says, "We made it." And somehow, without meaning to, you believe her. Because the deadliest trail in history didn't kill you. Because you didn't just survive it, you endured it. You learned its secrets, paid its toll, and kept your soul intact. The gold might be in your pocket now, but the real treasure, that's you, still here, still breathing, still human. So now, as the frost settles in and the days grow short again, you sit beside the fire in your battered coat and scuffed up boots, listening to the river hum like a lullaby that's run out of words. There's no rush anymore, no more deadlines, no more ghost stories wrapped in gold. Just the slow, quiet pace of a life rebuilt out of survival. You don't dream of mansions or silk-lined jackets. You dream of dry socks, steady hands, and coffee that doesn't taste like pine needles. And maybe, just maybe, a spring that doesn't come with a shovel. Maggie's nearby, patching a tear in the tent like she's done it 100 times, because she has. She's humming again, the same off-key tune that's followed you all the way from the coast. She doesn't say much these days, but when she does, it matters. Like when she told you the river doesn't reward greed, just patience. Or when she said surviving wasn't the goal, it was the proof you still had something left to live for. The gold's still there, not just in your tin, but in the earth, in the river, in the whispered stories passed between tents. People will keep chasing it, long after you're gone. Some will make it, most won't. But none of them will really understand what it costs until they're neck-deep in mud with a broken pan and frostbite knocking on their door. You lie back and watch the stars sharpen in the cold sky. You've made it through the worst of it. Not rich, maybe, but not buried either. And in the Klondike, that's about as close to treasure as anyone ever gets.